Recording starts. We are recording.
Good evening and welcome. I am Steve Friedman, the mayor. This is my first meeting and I'm welcoming all of you to our January meeting of the Clyde Hill City Council. I want to note that this is a hybrid meeting, so we have residents and council members and staff both here in attendance as well as virtually. I officially call this meeting to order. Courtney, a roll call, please.
All council members are present.
Thank you. Let's first start with everyone standing, whether here or virtually, and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Section 1 of the agenda includes, section 2 of the agenda.
There's more in section 1.
You're right. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. I'll make this announcement at the beginning. This is the first meeting I've done. I'm looking for any and all participation to help me make sure we run a clean and smooth meeting. And within the first 2 minutes, I've got my first help. Thank you so much. What's most important now is we need section 1.2, the oath of office. In this case, will be administered by Clerk Rolla, who swear me in as mayor, and followed by I will administer swearing in Ryan Olson in the position number 4 of the council. And there's my second mistake.
All
It's
right.
going to be Courtney. Where do you want me to be?
You can stand right there. That's fine. So if you can raise your hand and then repeat after me.
Okay.
I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Steve Friedman, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform
that I will faithfully and impartially perform
and discharge the duties of the office of mayor
and discharge the duties of the office of mayor
according to the law and the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now it's my pleasure to administer the oath of office to Ryan Olson, who will step in as council member, position number 4. Raise your right hand. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Ryan Olson, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington
and the Constitution and the laws of the state of Washington
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform
and discharge the duties of the office of council member
and discharge the duties of the office of council member
according to the law and the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So in advance of moving on to section 2 of the agenda, I do want to make just a couple of brief remarks. As you can tell, this is my first meeting as mayor, and I want to make sure everyone really understands how honored I am to serve the residents of Clyde Hill. My role of mayor is all about the residents and doing the right thing for our community. And I realize we might not always agree on what the right thing is, but my goal is to always consider the thoughts and comments of our residents and to make sure we always have a constructive discussion to come to a good decision for the residents of Clyde Hill. Running a council meeting is new to me, and I can't say I am an expert in Robert's rules, but I will do my best to run an effective meeting, and my meeting skills will improve over time. Please excuse the mistakes, which are unintentional, and any oversights in meeting protocol, which you have now already noticed. But let me tell you what I want to accomplish as mayor, at least from a very high level view. I want to do my part to improve the livability of the city. My job as mayor is to make sure staff has the tools and the resources to ensure that our city continues to maintain the services they offer to the residents. These services are a valuable resources to maintain home values and the quality of life that we have here in Clyde Hill. As mayor, I want to ensure our dedicated employees are always satisfied, they feel supported, and that they always think on behalf of the resident. I want to create a more effective working relationship between staff and city council. Tonight, we will select a new council member. We will approve commissioners for the planning commission. We will take steps to set up council subcommittees for 2024, and we'll make other decisions that will increase the staff, that will assist the staff and the council in working together and accomplishing our goals for 2024 and beyond. So I don't think I need to take any more time tonight with my comments. We have a lot to do in 2024, and I want to get on with the business of the city. Thank you. Okay, so actually now on to the approval of the agenda. And I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda of January 9th, 2024 as presented.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
I was going to move a couple of sections out of the consent area. Is that right? Can I do that, or do I do that at the consent area? I'm not an expert at Robert's rules either, so.
I don't know. What's the question? How do we do that?
I think that after the second, you say is there discussion, and then he says, I want to move stuff.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well,
I would move that we move sections 8.2 for the minutes of the 12/12 city council meeting, and section 8.4 on the grant, that move to the next section on discussion topics, or outside of the consent area. Anyway, does that make sense? So it would be 8.2.
consideration for the minutes, okay, and then on the motion to authorize the funding of the Department of Ecology.
Yes, if we can move that outside of the consent. I have no preference as to where it might go, but anyway, outside of the consent agenda. We have a second?
So somewhere in 9.
Somewhere in
9 is usually where it would go.
Or, anywhere in 9.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to move section 8.2 and 8.4 to the discussion section. I would suggest that we move it to 9.9 and 9.10. Great.
Okay.
And we've had a motion and a second. All in favor of moving these off the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll move those off into section 9. And now we go back, I believe, to the motion to approve the agenda as amended. Do I need to do another?
It's fine.
Okay, so we've had
I second.
a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that's approved. So agenda is approved as amended. We will now move on to section 3, which is the non-agenda public comments. And before we do that, let me make a couple of quick comments on here. This is an opportunity for brief comments to the city council about the terms not on the agenda for the public hearing in section 10. The city's public comment section is a limited public forum. It does not provide speakers the right to address any issue that comes to mind. Rather, members of the public are limited to a maximum of 3 minutes for their public comments, and public comment will be allowed only on issues directly related to pertinent city business. Council members will not respond directly at the meeting, but they may ask staff to research and report back on the issue. No speaker may engage in disorderly, disruptive, disturbing, delaying, or boisterous conduct that substantially interrupts, delays, or disturbs the peace and good order of the proceedings of the council, including conduct such as, but not limited to, the use of profane language or obscene gestures, hand clapping, stomping of feet, whistling, making noise, yelling, or similar demonstrations. The city council supports the public's First Amendment rights, but it does not tolerate disruptive comment. Those who attempt to abuse their opportunity for public comment should be on notice that their speech and time may be interrupted and immediately terminated. Hateful speech or behavior will be swiftly condemned. So when called upon, please state your name, and if you are a resident, Clyde Hill, for the record. And I might add that in the packet is a letter of public comment from Julie Bethel regarding trees. So is there anybody else who wishes to make a comment? No, I don't see anybody online.
Nobody's raising their hand online.
Very good. I think we have nobody here to comment, so I believe we can now move on to section 4, which is a discussion topic regarding public comment. Councilmember Sidwell, I believe you've had some comments on this. I'll give you an opportunity to make your.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the language that we see in today's agenda first showed up at our meeting on December 12th. It was modified in terms of it modified the guidance, the guardrails that were giving the residents on how to behave at the meeting. And I'll have to excuse myself, I guess to a certain degree. It was my second meeting, and I didn't think to really focus on the changed language. And so I didn't speak to it. Why am I bringing it up? Because I have two concerns about the language. The language seems to be overachieving in terms of establishing the guidelines. In my view, doesn't really set a welcoming tone to our residents. And I think, at least when I was a resident, still a resident, and running for council, the common thing I heard is that, we wanted to get resident engagement. And I feel that this language is not conducive to that. Some will say that because we've had a few incidents lately, one at Federal Way, and maybe there's others, that we should refresh the language, and maybe we should. I'm not, I'm okay with refreshing the language and putting maybe some more parameters on it. But I would say we haven't seen this kind of behavior at Clyde Hill or the sister cities. And I don't see any indications that we would have this behavior at Clyde Hill. And so some of the residents looked at this language and said, well, what's going on Clyde Hill? Why do we have to have this language? Is there something we need to be concerned about? Do we have a problem? So I have some suggested language. I won't read it here. But the second concern I have is on the first paragraph of the language where it talks about council members will not respond directly at the meeting, but they may ask staff to research and report back on an issue. My view on that, again, as a resident, that I presented to the city council, and I felt that I didn't get any feedback, acknowledgement. It was, and then it was, if I'm being honest, it was difficult to get a response from either council or the city on my small inconsequential matter. And I've heard that elsewhere when I was running for this office. So there is no law that prohibits city council from asking clarifying questions. Don't get me wrong. I don't want this to turn into a raging debate with a resident about whatever their issue is. But I feel this language limits my ability to even ask. I think the language is unclear as to what I can do. It almost seems like I can't respond at all. My intent here would have language that would say, that would give me the green light, give us the green light, I should say, to ask clarifying questions and at least give the resident, an indication if it's needed that we hear you, we're listening, and we may have a clarifying question or two, just to give them that assurance, him or her. So that was the two overriding concerns, and it got my attention because I got a couple emails from residents, and then I looked at the language last week. And so I spoke to Mayor Friedman. We had a dialogue about it. And so I'm requesting that we consider a motion to modify the language or have an offline session to think about modifying the language that would address my two concerns. Those are my comments on the language.
I'm sorry, did you just want to go in order?
You? No, I was gonna call on you next.
Oh, okay.
I spent 3 years being called on first, and I'm gonna start. I'm going to start with 5, just this one, at least this one.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Your Honor. Subject to what council members Muramoto and Olson have to say on this, I want to say that I understand the context that gave us this revised language. And I also understand Councilmember Sinwell's feedback on this. I want to suggest that when we get to the Clyde Hill Council subcommittee discussion that the tentative current active Mayor Pro Tem put together, that when we figure out who's on the rules and guidelines subcommittee, that the first thing they do is look at this language and then come back with a recommendation that they can present to you ahead of the February council meeting. I offer that because I don't think there's anything we do about the language that we've already adhered to for the public comment section that's over this time. And it seems just in terms of keeping into lanes, having the Rules and Guidelines Committee look at this makes the most sense. I don't think it's something we want to dive into here and now. Thank you.
Councilmember Olson.
Agreed on that. Rules and Guidelines Committee should be, that's the place for it. Certainly agreed. And also acknowledging Councilman Sinwell's comments too. And I think some of this, the language in here is redundant and unnecessary. I think we all kind of understand what inappropriate behavior is when we see it. And I don't think it's necessary to, call out each different type of inappropriate behavior. So that would be my only comment. I think it could be condensed and made to be more appropriate.
Muramoto.
Yeah, just, I think so I don't have a problem with the language. It could be shortened certainly. In the rules and guidelines, we also have sections in terms of council decorum. And I think this is pretty consistent with council decorum too. So maybe we look at modifying and applying the same rules for council decorum as we do for public comment. So that's on the second section. It does seem a little, wordy and verbose, but I understand. I have seen some meetings where it gets pretty rowdy, and it's just without some guidelines in place. I just don't want, for whatever reason, this to turn into, that wrong stuff. Regarding the first one, I would be interested in, I've always kind of wondered why we didn't allow for any questions. I presume that is a bit of probably the rules and guidelines and or the agenda topics in terms of a public meeting, because if suddenly we start discussing things that somebody brings up, it is a non-agenda item, so we couldn't really do anything with those discussions. So I've been interested in legal counsel's perspective on why that text is even there and why the council was limited not to even ask questions. Because I tend to agree with Councilman Sidwell that it seems kind of strange to just nod at people and say, leave now, thank you, or not even say thank you.
It's just customary for starters. There's no rule. It's perfectly okay if you want to engage in a dialogue. It is customary in most councils that they just say that people are there to speak and not to engage in a dialogue. Sometimes it turns into a he said, she said, a dialogue back and forth. Well, I meant this. No, you didn't. You're right. You're wrong. That can extend, that can sort of help a meeting to unravel. That's one of the reasons why. The other is it confuses the amount of time each speaker is given. If you are given 3 minutes, do you count the time the council member is responding or questioning? If you do, does the next person have the same length of time? The timekeeper is keeping track of all this. So it's just something that's sort of organically evolved with a lot of city councils over the years. The fact that it says that doesn't mean you can't engage in and give some follow-up or ask some questions. You can certainly modify the language, but that's the basis for it. And I think that was there in the previous public comment session too. Yeah.
And it is consistent. For example, ETP has the same public comment and no dialogue.
Sorry. Just to this point, my recollection is that when former Councilmember Jones and I were working through the rules and guidelines, and I'm sorry that we never said this explicitly, and there wasn't room getting up the first version. Next Rules and Guidelines Committee can investigate this. The thought was that after public comments, at least for a regular meeting, any council member can move to amend the agenda and add an item for something that had come up in public comment. And so if there was some public comment that merited discussion, there's a way to modify the agenda on the fly and make room for it. So had there been a public comment that said, I want I have feedback about the Clyde Hill logo, why haven't you done thus and such, and it really spoke to us. A member could move to modify the agenda even in the middle of the meeting, is my understanding, and add an item, 9.11. And there'd be this process, and then the council could have consensus around, do we collectively want to go and talk about this topic? But again, that's just to Councilmember Muramoto's point. We have mechanisms that can.
Okay. Well, during a regular meeting, but during a special, we can't modify the agenda. That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
I did correspond with the city attorney on this. And that came up as one option. It came up that it is possible to interact with the person making the comment if they were to choose, if that was of interest. But also what the city attorney said in terms of time, and also part of the language here is to protect the city in the event that you have a speaker engaging in this type of behavior, so that we have already set out the rules and guidelines related to the speech that's made. I believe that's valuable. What I would suggest is, I think it's a fine idea to have a rules and guideline committee go through and look at the language and change it to the extent they feel fit, assuming they will work with the city attorney to make sure it meets the legal rules and protects the city appropriately. So. Okay, so do we move on? Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. All right, section 5. Consideration of candidates for appointment to council position 1 vacancy. You can see the vacancy to my left. So I'd like to thank the council applicants, Lisa Slivka and Tim Radigan, for their willingness to serve our community. Initially, to review the process for this evening, what I'd like to do is lay out the plan, which is for council to select a new council member for position number 1. The selected council member will be sworn in and join tonight's meeting. To date, we received applications and resumes from each applicant. Both applicants have participated in a detailed interview with the selection committee. The committee was comprised of Mayor Klass, Councilmember Hakamovich, and me. Tonight, council will have an opportunity to meet each applicant. The applicant will be given approximately 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Then each council member will be able to ask a question plus a follow-up if desired. This is similar in process. This is a similar process to what we followed last April when we selected the new council member. The applicant not participating in the presentation Q&A at that time will remain outside the council chambers And at the conclusion of the council's meeting with the applicant, council will adjourn to consider the qualifications of each candidate. And when they return to the meeting, they will vote to select a new council member. So we're looking for some help from staff in terms of where we want the council, the applicants to sit and move forward. And I assume what we'll do is ask, I flipped the coin already. Lisa Slivka will be first. Tim Radigan will be second. And so I think Tim will have to step outside and close the doors and continue with the meeting. If you want to sit there or chair, that, just wherever you're comfortable.
We can also pull over the podium if you'd like a place
Yeah,
to
you
put
prefer
your
behind.
documents or anything like that. I don't need a podium. Thank you. Well, as you all know, I'm Lisa Slivka, and I'd like to start off by thanking all of you for your willingness to serve. I think that the community very often loses sight of the fact that this is a volunteer position. Nobody is here because they're getting paid. Nobody's here because they have any other agenda, I believe, other than wanting to help make Clyde Hill the best possible place that it can be to live. And thank you for contributing to that. I'm here this evening because I too would like to help make Clyde Hill the best place that it can be and continue to be. I've lived in the neighborhood for 34 years, and I feel that everybody in the neighborhood has a duty to try and make this the best that we can. And I'm at a point in my life where I have time to actually step up to serve. I applied for the open council position last year, but the timing, as much as I wanted to participate, the timing wasn't right for me. I had a long planned trip to Japan and I was gone for the month of October, and I didn't feel that I would be able to run for office when I was out of town for the month before the election. You have my resume in front of you, and I think my experience speaks for itself. And I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you why I think I'm the best candidate for the job. I'm going to sit here and tell you that I think that my experience is relevant. I think that the way that you guys operate as a government body is very much like the way that the nonprofits that I've been involved with operate, where the council has a defined role, the mayor has a defined role, the staff has a defined role. And part of the challenge is making sure that everybody stays in their lane to move the agenda forward. And if you think that there's value in that, and you think that my experience would help to contribute to that, then I would be happy to join you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Sinwell, do you have, you may open up the questioning.
Okay, yeah, thank you for volunteering to, or at least for applying for the position. So the question, Lisa, would be, as you know, I just ran for office along with Councilman Brian Olson. We knocked on a lot of doors, got a lot of information. I learned a lot about Clyde Hill for me anyway. I had to go through the primary and the general. And at that time, there was some residual emotions about Prop 1. And so I guess the question, how do you see, and that emotion seems to be, and the feelings seems to be subsiding a little bit, but there's still some of that out there, right? And of course, Prop 1 was about the form of governance, and it wasn't passed, as I recall. So Lisa, the direct question for you as a council member, how would you bring the residents together? What kind of assurances can you give the residents? Say, okay, look, maybe I was on this side or that side, but how would you respond to residents? Okay, I don't know, man. How's she going to represent everyone faithfully and to her best ability? I know it's kind of an awkward question, but.
That's a totally fair question, and one that I expected somebody
Okay.
to ask.
Sorry, I had to be that guy.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Prop 1 lost, and I haven't spent any time dwelling over it, and I know that the residents didn't support it. So this is the world that we live in, and I accept that this is the world that we live in. And all I can do is show by my actions that I am happy to participate in the council as it exists.
Thank you.
Any further?
One last question real quick. The other thing for me is trying to get residents engaged. And I talked about that earlier in the comments I had on that language. Do you have any ideas on how we as a city could get better resident engagement? I know some residents are reluctant to engage. It's kind of a push-pull. Do you have any off the top of your head? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I'll ask the other candidates the same question. But do you think that's an issue?
I think it's a huge issue.
And then do you have any brainstorm, instant gee whiz ideas that say, let's get better engagement of the residents?
Well, I think it's a huge issue. And in the same way that you were talking about where people speak at the council and they don't get any feedback, I think for a start, people need to get feedback when they choose to step up. I know that I sent many an email and spoke quite a number of times at council meetings and never got any feedback. And I think that needs to change if we want people to think that we're actually responsive. And I think that one of the things that you did during your campaign, which made a huge difference, was actually having a presence at Queen Bee where people saw you and you were approachable. And I think those are probably two of the best things that we can do is being responsive and being accessible.
Thank you. Sorry to take it from
I'm intrigued by the line in here that says I'm well aware of the line between governance and operations. And I'd like to kind of better understand how you see that applying to council, mayor, staff, and how you would apply those learnings to what goes on in this, not in council chambers, but in the Clyde Hill government in general.
So in general, the council responsibilities are to approve the budget. The council doesn't make the budget, right? And the council approves policy. Beyond that, or approves laws. So beyond that, I think the role of the council is to ask questions, right? To make everybody else better. But it's an advisory role. They don't actually own. They don't own the staff roles, right? And the mayor is the one who directs the staff. Although in the document, there's a document in the packet that talks about roles and responsibilities where it talks about the council also has the ability to contribute to priorities. But that's as far as the council goes with what they do.
Okay, thanks.
Lisa,
Hi.
thanks for running for this. Appreciate it. So I understand that you've had some experience with the city. You've come to the city in the past and have interacted with staff. Can you kind of explain your experience with staff? Were you treated fairly? And tell me about that process for you.
I haven't had a whole lot of experience with, well, or I'm not exactly sure where you're going. So are you talking about things that I've spoken at the council meetings about?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say I was treated fairly or not because I never really got a response most of the time. Yeah.
All right. And just one other question, if you could change something about, a rule with the city or something, what would you change?
I would clean up Title 17 and I would consistently enforce. I think that's where we run into a lot of problems as a city. Yeah.
Out of respect for time, I'm declining to ask any questions. I was part of that interview committee, and so I think I had more than my fair share.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Slivka, and what I'll do is ask you to exit for just a little while. You're welcome to come back. We'll ring in the Hope we didn't keep you waiting too long.
No, I got to catch up on some of those photos in the hallway. It was a nice visit.
You're welcome to sit,
Or do you want
stand,
podium or?
whatever.
I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm okay.
But you're
welcome to sit.
you got 3 minutes to to talk to the council, make your presentation, and then we'll go around and they'll ask you questions as I stated earlier. So appreciate the opportunity, and it's been a pleasure meeting. I think I met with most of you in last week or so. And I think you're familiar enough with my background, but the last 35 years I have spent in investment banking at Citigroup before retiring in 2022, running the Western region for state and local government municipal financing, basically the 10 biggest Western states. In that capacity, working with state and local governments on budgetary issues, financial issues, predominantly capital project related, but you can't help but get more involved into the other aspects of the governmental budget process, legislative process, and financings overall. I should mention that during that, two things. One, quite a bit of travel, 3-4 days a week, less opportunity to perhaps be as involved locally as I might otherwise be. I have a little bit of a political and governmental background before my days in banking. And also precluded by Citigroup's regulations because of any potential conflicts of interest. It is hard to get involved locally, politically, or electorally because of possible conflicts of interest with clients that we had in here. That included state of Washington, Washington DOT, Sound Transit, King County, Bellevue, Port of Seattle, overlapping taxing districts. So not an excuse as to following and what's going on in Clyde Hill, but I think my retirement has presented the opportunity to avail the community that we've lived here for the last 30 years to become more invested, more engaged, and help in what I quite honestly view as Clyde Hill basically at the crossroads. There, I think I sense a history where Clyde Hill and smaller communities could be left alone, do their business, and move on, and then kind of have the occasional interaction with some of the other governmental entities. I think those days are over. I think some may think it's overreach, some might think it's encroachment, but communities around us, the larger communities, the larger entities, the overlapping entities, the state, are going to be more involved and oftentimes dictate things that Clyde Hill's going to have to be aware of. And that doesn't mean you have to roll over and say that's the way it's going to be, but I think you're going to be finding yourselves engaging with folks like that considerably more often. And at least having a perspective and a history of where they're coming from, where you might find common ground, and where you can find consensus, perhaps not just receive their dictates or their legislative requirements. And those crossroads right now, the next 2 years are going to be a profound difference for Clyde Hill. I think the comprehensive planning of itself is heavy task. Baggage that comes with that and HB 1110 and all the other things that the state is now mandating and looking at is just going to take that kind of interaction and engagement with not just the state, but all those other entities that I mentioned. And I think the experience I bring avails the opportunity to help Clyde Hill navigate that process in these critical 18 to 24 months. Appreciate your time and happy to answer any questions.
I'll let you start again. Well, thank you for putting your hat in the ring on this. I was in your position about 8 months ago as well. And impressive resume, the contributions you guys make to the nonprofits and the foundations you and your spouse are very noteworthy. The question I have is resident engagement. As you know, I ran along with Ryan and we were running for office a while ago. And I was wondering whether or not you agree, and then maybe what you might do about it, Tim, is do you think that the city as a whole could do a better job of engaging with the residents? And if you think that's a viable concern, do you have an idea or two as to how you might improve the engagement so we could maybe consider the voice of the residents as we formulate our policies?
Great question. And I wrestle with that, and I certainly don't have the experience or the opportunity to engage like the rest of you have. Clyde Hill is, I think, challenged because it doesn't have as much commercial space and interaction and opportunity to just have the incidental ongoing interaction with its constituents. So it's basically outreach from the town, the council, the administration. And that is challenging. The mail orders help, the announcements and listening in on the council meetings, all, but for the most part, I think a lot of folks are kind of going about their business
and it's hard to find them on their terms in their space. I think continued awareness, mailings, maybe some more. There are public opportunities, Clyde Hill, other opportunities where the community might gather, is to just be more active in spreading the word and encouraging that engagement. You just have to get out and encourage people on an ongoing basis. We want to hear from you. We love to hear from you. We need to engage more often. I think some of the issues coming up in the next year or two are going to bring some of that forward, because you're going to have more residents more engaged and active in these issues than the ones that might have been before the council in years past. And that's a great opportunity to meet them and engage on those topics.
Thank you.
So your finance background is just amazingly impressive. I'm curious, as with your finance background, if you spent any time looking at the city budget, and I noticed because it wasn't part of your priorities, and if that is kind of I guess a tacit approval of where our budget sits, number one. And then secondly, along kind of adjacent to that is you mentioned improved infrastructure. So I'm curious about what improved infrastructure you would be looking at, and presuming that would take some capital funds or some better budgeting.
On the budget, I think in my experience, regardless of the side of the government, Clyde Hill, state of Washington, state of California, any size, the budget is where the rubber hits the road and where you really have to make the hard choices. I think Clyde Hill, while smaller in size and budget, has the same challenges where there's essentially been a structural deficit for at least the last 5 years. Recurring revenues are lower than recurring expenditures, and that trend's going to continue, and the expenditures are going to grow faster than the revenues going forward. You have a general fund budget that's grown by about 50% in the last 6 or 7 years. One of the things I've noticed is that while you haven't used it, the reserve fund has not grown accordingly. And I think the challenge going forward is that you're going to find yourself in slower, more challenging times, slower revenue growth, and increasing expenditures, that you may have to dip into those reserves more frequently and more significantly, and look at how to bolster that reserve. I think the city has done a good job using the tools at hand, transferring in monies, using some of the federal dollars, using ending fund balances to balance the budget, which is constitutionally required. But I think that's going to get harder each subsequent year. And so I think revisiting kind of how you build the budget, how you're going to be to do financial sustainability, I think is going to be a really high priority for the city. And I'm sorry, on your other question on the
Infrastructure project, you said infrastructure project.
I mean, that's basically what we did. All of the bond financings that Sound Transit in County, any of the throughout the West, is where we got most involved in selling those bonds. Probably in Washington, we worked on, I don't know, $8 to $10 billion of projects. Sorry, because some of that came out in taxes that you will pay every day. So, but we were just doing the Lord's work anyway. I think that is where services are delivered, and specific to Clyde Hill, I think the stormwater is just going to be at the top of the list and the challenges. And it may be a way to revisit what that might be. Maybe it's in the form of a new utility to alleviate some of the other pressures on the budget. Otherwise, there might be an opportunity to make that even more self-supportive, stand on its own, and allow more flexibility with the rest of the budget priorities that Clyde Hill is going to be facing in the coming years.
Member Olson.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for running for this. So your experience at the state level and engagement there is impressive and something I think we need. How would you suggest that Clyde Hill, as a small city that's really probably not on the state's radar, how do we engage the state more and get more visibility to some of our issues with legislation that they're passing that is really affecting us detrimentally in a lot of ways?
A couple of things. I think early and under the radar is more important. If, generally speaking, my experience is if you're waiting to engage the legislature when they're in session because a hot issue has been percolating, it's probably too late. The committee work is already being done. The lines have been drawn, and somebody, I hate to say it, like a Clyde Hill coming in with a hat in hand perception isn't going to get a lot of traction. I think the work is done discreetly, and I don't mean that in a non-transparent way. I mean in a lower profile manner to engage them. and have the opportunity, maybe in consolidation and coordination with the other East Side communities, the Point communities, to show a common ground and maybe a little bit more vocal together. And have a conversation. I don't think the engagement with the legislature, with the Department of Commerce, with Wash DOT is helpful to just come and say, we don't like this, we want this, we need this. I think it's a conversation first. I think you try to understand where they're coming from, and in that opportunity, start laying the groundwork of where you're coming from, so that a subsequent 2-3 meetings down the road, you have a better perspective of where you're coming from and probably a better opportunity to find common ground and have your voice be heard and more effectively.
I'm going to decline to ask questions again, out of respect for time and the fact that I had the opportunity before.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
So, let me bring back Lisa. The council will move into executive session to make the selection pursuant to RCW 42.30.110. The city council will meet in executive session for the purpose of evaluating the qualifications of a candidate for appointment to elective office. This part of the agenda is expected to last approximately 15 minutes, after which time the city council will reconvene and is expected to make a motion regarding the appointment of an individual to the vacant city council position number 1. Thanks. I will be back and hopefully continue. All right, I think we're back in session. I think, do I have to ask for a recording, just confirm we're recording again? Okay. All right, we've had our executive session and a chance to discuss the qualification of the candidates. I'm looking for a motion to appoint Lisa Slivka or Tim Radigan as council member position number 1. Do I have a motion for a candidate?
Motion to appoint Tim Radigan.
We have a motion to appoint Tim Radigan to council. Do we have a second?
Oh, second.
Okay, we have a second. Thank you. Do we have discussion? Okay, all those in favor of
You can speak if you, to your motion.
Sure.
I'm
yeah.
sorry, thank you.
I just think that the state government right now is pushing down a lot of legislation on cities that are stripping away our sovereignty as a city. And I feel like Tim brings a certain an important perspective and experience with state government that is a blind spot on the council. And I think we could really use his resume and to kind of understand more fully and thoroughly what we can do, how to respond, and what we can do to mitigate some of this legislation that's coming our way. It's only just started, and so that's my comment.
Ryan, I agree that Tim's got great qualifications, got 2 great candidates, and I can see the reasons for your statements. One of them acknowledge the qualifications.
Yeah, I just, despite the way that Prop 1 turned out, I'll just say that I really, I like Prop 1, not because it had anything to do with the mayor, but because it expanded the council. And I think the more people we have on the council, the more we can tap the energy and the smarts. And you two have the most amazing smarts and would both be additions, great additions to the council. I wish we could suddenly today move to 6 council members and have you both. That said, this is like we did this a year ago. This is like one of the hardest decisions in the world.
Yeah. So let's move to the vote. We have a motion to appoint Tim Radigan to council position number 1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay. Nay. Okay, the motion fails. Do we have another motion? Any other motions to appoint a council member to position number 1?
I would move to appoint Lisa Slivka as council 1.
Okay.
Council 1.
Motion to
I'll
appoint Lisa,
second the motion.
and a second to appoint Lisa Slivka to council position number 1. Any discussion?
I would, again, super difficult choice. I know that's, and I echo Councilman Miramoto's. In the fantasy outcome, we would have 2 additions, but excellent qualifications by both. And as a new council member, yeah, we spoke about the qualifications at length, and I think we all have an informed view. I think we had a very appropriate, and as you know, very lengthy discussion on this topic. And so it certainly wasn't rushed into it per se, but that's it for my available comments.
Happy to go in order.
Councilman Miramoto, any comments?
I have one comment. Mayor, you, in your opening remarks, talked about a more functional council and how the council and administration can work well together. During the interviews of the candidates last week, one theme that came up in discussion with all the candidates was governance and experience with governance issues. And at some level, the city council is a board. We are fiduciaries of the municipal corporation. We are the board, and the executive branch should go and be executives. I think that the experience with board work and with, for lack of a better expression, understanding the lane, understanding what are the lanes and where should people operate and how do the lanes work together, would be very helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, let's move to the vote. All those in favor of appointing Lisa Slivka to council member position number 1, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Lisa. You are now our council position number 1. And
Mr. Radigan, if I could make one comment. I would love to have you stay involved with the city. Your expertise is just outstanding. However we can tap you in your expertise, be it the state, lobbying, consulting, doing whatever. Please, 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 please. We're in a position where we can use all the resources we can do. And in your priorities, you mentioned that too. So please stay involved.
Your lovely gifts for being council member is to be sworn in and to take this spot, this position.
As long as you promise to not always call on me first.
That wasn't part of me. I'll just do that from here in this case.
Okay.
You'll raise your right hand. I, Lisa Slivka, do solemnly swear
I, Lisa Slivka, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the laws of the state of Washington
and the laws of the state of Washington
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform
and discharge the duties of the office of council member
and discharge the duties of the office of council member
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for clarity, we had 2 name tags prepared, so. No, it's ridiculous.
All right. So let's moving on with our busy agenda tonight. Making sure we are where I think we are. We're at the consent agenda. And you'll remember that we moved 2 items were moved off the consent agenda for discussion. That was item number 8.2 and item 8.4, but the rest is still there. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion is approved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Without asking for discussion, but I think we went past that one pretty quickly. Okay, moving to section number 9. And, you know, I think we start here at section 9.1 with the mayor pro tem, and that's really, I was looking at the name tag because I thought maybe I hadn't looked at that. Anyway,
If you're the honorable, you can call me.
the next few parts of the section are really related to council business and trying to organize the council for their future work. And I think the first step is making sure we appoint a mayor pro tem. So I believe this is something I need to have them make a motion to handle.
According to the council rules and guidelines, Mayor Pro Tem is elected at the first meeting of the calendar year or as soon after that as is practical. And takes a majority vote of the full council, which we now have. So it's similar to the process we just watched. You could make a nomination and take a vote on it. Move to nominate.
So I move that Councilmember Kim Muramoto be the Mayor Pro Tem of the City Council of the City of Clyde Hill.
I second.
We have a move and a second. Any discussion?
As I made the motion, I think this is the easiest vote we're going to take this year.
I think he wants to run because he missed being the Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, no.
Just when you thought you were out, they pull you back in.
Okay. So we have a motion to appoint Councilmember Muramoto as the Mayor Pro Tem. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, no.
You gonna do it?
No.
No, I won't do it.
You need a Sharpie for that.
Sorry. Not this right.
Section 9.2 is a discussion on council rules and guidelines in the review. It's already kind of come up in earlier discussion. I think the purpose of this section here is to consider whether we should appoint, use the rules and the council rules and guidelines committee, the subcommittee, to review existing guidelines and come back with some suggestions for changes that council can approve or not and work together. Is it an assumption that that committee will be reformed in the next month with the work?
You know, and I put that down as an option based on, so given the number of committees we have, and I heard loud and clear the concerns of not adding additional committees. That said, if we can make rules and guidelines as, I'll call it a non-super time-consuming thing, then yes, I would be all in favor of the rules and guidelines. Again, my concern is that we have enough on our plate, and I put a proposal in before that we'll discuss tonight. But yeah, I have a plan in front.
So we leave that discussion on rules and guidelines to the formation of the committee, to the same pieces of putting the committees together for council, right? Part of that, kind of a consensus. I think you can almost move to the next discussion on committees anyway, because I think it's going to be relevant to clarify, especially to the newer council members, about how you want that process to work.
Okay, so earlier today, and sorry, I didn't want to put it in the council packet because I wasn't really sure exactly where I was going to go with this today, but I put a quick where we were, where I think what I am proposing, and this again is for discussion. This is not, anything other than for discussion purposes. And so what you'll find is the existing structure we had for 23, kind of the proposed structure for 24, and we'll have some discussion in terms of how these things all work for the benefit of those new to the council, because it was not clear to me until today, trying to work through how all these things interact. So again, really for discussion. But if you noticed in 23, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Traffic, we didn't really do anything with, but we had finance, land use, facilities, rules and guidelines, and the existing members of those councils, at least as Mayor Friedman, the Honorable Mayor Friedman moved into Mayor Pro Tem. He removed himself from some of the council, so we did some juggling. But you can see kind of where the general details of where those subcommittees were. As we move to 24, in just some discussions we've kind of had, part of this again was a little bit in land use, a little bit talking to the administration. My proposal or the discussion is to kind of combine some of these things in a way that makes sense. the budget committee, I think, is absolutely totally necessary and needs to continue on. And this is a number of things, including how to build a sustainable budget for 2025, setting up priorities, setting up all those things, and potentially even looking into 26 and beyond. And I think rolled into that, just because I don't think it takes a tremendous amount of extra effort, is to look at what we have been doing with the investment monies that we have in some of the reserve funds. I don't think that's an extra, amount of work. One of the things that, again, as this committee gets formed, my request would be to redefine these as you see fit, as the committee members are seeing fit. So tonight, what I'd like to do is just lay these things out, and then as council, in the next couple weeks, if you send me notes and say, Kim, this is really what I'd be interested in terms of participating, that would be wonderful. And hopefully by the beginning of February, or even by the end of January, we can begin to look at really structuring these, and in February come back and take a vote in terms of, assuming we need to, who's on what subcommittee. And I'll remind you, each subcommittee is 2, because we can't put 3, because that becomes a quorum. So budget and finance, again, I just explained. Land use is just huge. I considered breaking this down into more, but again, based on the mayor and administration request, I think we just leave it as land use. I think the biggest challenge here is looking at figuring out the priorities of what land use really means. There's a lot of very short-term components to this, Title 17 priorities and how we're going to change that. There's also the comp plan, call it tracking. I think that that's well down the path. I think there is some discussion, some components within land use. And then certainly the major impact is looking at some of the new state laws and how that's going to affect us, because we're going to quickly run out of runway in terms of what we need to do to look at Title 17 changes. The next one is capital projects and facilities, and I think this is primarily feeds into the budget process. Things like City Hall renovation, which we talked about a couple of years ago, which has kind of now fallen maybe to a lower priority. Maybe we don't need to do that, but I think that certainly is one topic. Our parks, what we're doing with parks and capital improvements, our road improvements, anything we need to do from a council perspective in terms of fleshing out the details of Fire Station 11 would go into that too. And again, my expectation is that the capital project subcommittee then would kind of set their own priorities in terms of what to focus in on meeting to meeting. I think there's a lot of work to do in stormwater utility. I think there's some very short-term things. Director Tozer has mentioned that there's some very short-term things we need to do, some filings with the state, so there's a very tactical component, but longer than that, how we get to this and how we figure out rate structures and all those other things, which is a tremendous amount of work and research that we need to do. So those are the primary 4, and then traffic, like I said, we haven't really done anything with traffic of a mindset just to say if we start to come up with traffic issues, I don't see why we can't break off a small team to go look at those issues. And then also the rules and guidelines to kind of crisp up what we've got in terms of our existing draft document. If you take a look at the next thing, this was kind of my feeble attempt to try to put all this stuff together in terms of kind of how this stuff flows together. These are all interrelated, obviously, because our capital projects have to feed the 25 budget, as does the stormwater. That's going to be potentially a revenue source. And then investments, of course, feed into that, which is kind of the budget process. So that's the 25 budget outlook. And then it turns into kind of long-term strategies for 26 and beyond. The next thing is this hairball called land use. This has been kind of one of those kind of mysterious things, because we kind of, as a city, we tend to get stuck around very tactical things like Title 17 changes, the comp plan, which is a very long-term thing. And of course, so the way that I kind of started thinking about this was that the comp plan is very long-term. Obviously, it's a 5-year to 10-year plan. That kind of drives some of our long-term vision And then we also have to roll into that some of our legislative mandates that are changing. And I think in the land use committee, we talked about how to prioritize those. Hopefully our consultant will actually provide us with some, all of the House and legislative mandates that are happening, both in terms of mandatory and things that probably don't apply, so we can prioritize those legislative mandates. That certainly needs to be in consideration. All of those then flow into Title 17 changes, and then that flows back into the Planning Commission. And this is the long drawn out process. The Planning Commission then will make the verbiage changes, and it comes back to the council. And working certainly with the administration to kind of figure out the exact language of that. So anyway, that's so now I'm really interested in any of your feedback in terms of, do those make sense? Argue with me, please, because that's kind of where I was hoping we get tonight is. Yep.
Question of clarification. So can you tell me what the roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are?
Planning Commission, so it's really Planning Commission, and Dean, I'll ask you to, it's twofold. One, right now, they're pretty much all consumed with driving the comprehensive plan. So they report to the mayor, they are outside of the council. It is a membership body of I should ask to defer to Brian. But right now, it's really the comp plan creation. Eventually, then they would also then create verbiage that gets back turned into the council, specifically the Title 17 changes. So as council, we wouldn't make those direct changes. It flows to the Planning Commission. The structure in 24 and into 25 is going to be how to prioritize creating the comp plan, because there's a deadline, but also figuring out how to do what I'll say is some of the very tactical things, like what we need to do in the prioritization of where Title 17 changes need to be. We've kind of stalled in terms of putting Title 17 changes together because we didn't want to create conflicts in Title 17 that weren't consistent with the comp plan.
Sure.
So.
Then when you talk about legislative mandates, how much of that goes back into whatever is going on with the mayor's group?
Well, it's a couple things. So those are the legislative mandates, are some of the House bills that passed. So the biggest one is auxiliary dwelling units, right? And now I saw in the legislature today is the potential of subdividing, being allowed to subdivide every piece of land, which is currently in the state. So this is one of those things, as Ryan mentioned, you know, there is state mandates that are coming down that will basically trump any of our codes. So we can say we want half-acre minimums, but the state can clearly write a law that said, no, sorry, you can't do that anymore.
Right, but I guess where I was going with that question is, I understand that there's going to be impact to us, but there's impact to all the communities, and I thought all the mayors were working together on whatever legislative effort we would have.
So there's a couple different things. So I think the points communities, because we have some very specific zoning that's, I won't say under attack, but that is being challenged by the state. There's also a number of organizations like AWC and some other ones that are trying to create kind of a body of knowledge that will say, here's our understanding of the current laws and the effects of that. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Let me,
You can
go ahead,
clarify,
absolutely.
if you don't mind, so I can jump in. The points communities are addressing legislation in two ways. One is identifying what's coming down the pipe so they can react to it. A lot of what Tim talked about, getting to the issues earlier than we did last year when things were passed before we could even address those issues. The second is a mechanism to work together so that we can come up with some common answers on some of these issues that are out there, because we have so much commonality.
Yeah.
And when we combine together, we can use the ideas, but we can also go to Olympia together as a group. The points communities tend to be ignored when it comes to state legislation
Right.
because of the demographics of our communities. So, however, the issues that we face really aren't that much different than other smaller cities. And we're trying to get out to address it. So today I was hearing about subdividing land. We've been talking about transit-oriented development, allowing higher density development near major rail stations and fast rapid transit systems and things like that. And that's the issue they're actually dealing with. And this is actually going to allow me to pass on having to tell you about it and later in the agenda. So, so anyway, that's part of what they're doing. So that's kind of how they work. They're working with it. But what we all learned last year was when it came to trying to understand all the legislation, to affect it, we have to get to it earlier. But what's going to come down, now we come to the committee. Just don't have to get back to what you're talking about. Because now what happens is it goes to council and or the planning commission for work on trying to address, come back to bring council or for council to figure out the language that we would need to adapt to the new legislation. At the same time, trying to make sure that we maintain what I would call the character of our community, which has been built out of single-family residences, throughout the entire city. And suddenly so it's true though. Once they pass the legislation in the state, it overtakes what we've got locally, and we have to adapt to it. So now our job in the next year or two is going to be to adapt to this legislation in the best way possible to limit what might be perceived to be the damage to the community.
When I saw 9.2 I wasn't sure what to think, and so that was on the city rules and guidelines. So I did look at the 20-page document. It's a great document. It's a great piece of work. So hats off to the author, Mr. Jones, apparently. Okay, well, not me, him. Okay. I have input, not for tonight because we're already running late, but if there is a process to enhance the document, evolve it, I'd be happy to weigh in. The one question I had on the document, since it's on the agenda, was, and sorry for the name question, is this the operative document that we should be looking to as council members today? And that we adopted it? Is it?
No, this is
I'm
really
sorry,
just.
are you asking about the rules and guidelines?
The rules and
The
guidelines.
city council adopted the rules and guidelines during calendar 2022. So they're the operating
So the 20-page
bylaws.
document is
Is
our.
the current operating bylaws for the body.
Okay. And we're proposing to examine, evolve, add, subtract, part of a subcommittee.
Actually, so during calendar 2022, they were assembled the first time. During calendar 23, we had the committee and we said, in terms of priorities, every other piece of work that's going on around comp plan, budget, everything else is more important than any changes to rules and guidelines. During calendar 23, we made one change to rules and guidelines, which is the creation of a position of liaison to the planning commission from the city council. That's the only change we made. And now this is just saying, yep, we can choose to revisit it or not.
And the reason I ask is I hate to get definitive, there's a section in there, 6.3.2. And this has to do with city's council's interaction with the city administration. And, the guide rules and, making sure we don't interfere with the workload. And so maybe I misunderstood because I've had a question or two, and maybe I should be looking at 6.3.2, and I think it says, as a council person, you can, if you have a request, you can either make a motion or talk to the mayor pro tem, and then the mayor pro tem would take that request to city administration. So if I had a request of city administration, is that, I presume this is the operative guidance.
Yeah, I don't know that, have we ever really, well, I mean, a lot of that, there's guidelines, I'll call it a guideline, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that any of us have ever said, you can't directly go talk to administration. I mean, I don't know if we ever put a structure.
I think, I'm sorry, this is breaking procedural bits, but just for the question, going and asking a question I think is a reasonable thing. We usually start with the city administrator out of respect to not randomizing the staff. I think that the 632 thing you're talking about is when you're making a request for work or a request for action.
Well, for example, in a council meeting session, I sort of asked for something. And it looks like it sort of wasn't responded to in this meeting, which is okay. I get. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, Sinwell, you're new, didn't understand the rules, didn't do it right. So, but we can take it offline. I just want to make sure, and maybe the genesis of my concern is that when we have a council meeting and we have various requests or ideas or notions, and maybe some of them are directed to city administration for clarification. Maybe the suggestion, maybe we need to look at that process to make sure that, hey, councilman, I get it. It's a good request, a bad request. We can do it. We can't do it. And we dispose of it maybe in the meeting itself. I don't want to create a crazy process or any, and I don't think you do either.
Nope.
And it sounds like 6.3.2 is sort of a one-off. Maybe I'm sitting at home and I got this idea of, oh man, I'd love to have this piece of information.
It's between council meetings.
Yeah.
When
Okay.
the idea.
So let's, but this is something to me, you guys, council can review.
Yeah, right.
Can clarify and can manage.
Absolutely. It is a working
So-
document. First and foremost, it's a working document. Right? So,
Councilmember Olson, you have anything to say?
No.
So one request from the subcommittee was, we have the first, of the sustainable budget meeting Friday. Probably virtually, since the weather. This is a meeting in which the finance committee would participate in.
Mhm.
And given that I know we have one person who's been volunteered to be in the committee. So I think it would be useful to add that second individual who can participate Friday.
Well, for what it's worth, we can just expect the entire council to participate since we.
Well, that changes the nature of the meeting. From it, and so to the public, this is more of a study session, I think is the way to describe it. So, and that has been generally the way that the BAC meetings, which is really what this is. So it'd be good just to have a second person who can join the subcommittee or wants us to join it, be in the meeting.
Got it. So you're looking right now, we have a quorum, we can make eye contact. Who would like to be the second member of the Budget and Finance Subcommittee joining Councilmember Sarah?
That would help on the meeting on Friday. Is that you?
No, that's not it.
Anybody want to join that meeting?
I'm happy to
We can do that, and if there's nobody who does it, then we'll have a committee of one to start, and we'll if that is a preference.
That's fine. No, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, that's the work. You guys doubles your work.
Just before we move off 9.3, did you have anything for? No. I have three tactical, thankfully restrained things. I just want to say them out loud with everyone. I want to recommend that we minimize the number of subcommittees. Technically, we could have 10 subcommittees. City Administrator Rolla pointed out to me and Councilmember Muramoto, Mayor Pro Tem Muramoto, that we can have as many committees as we want, but fundamentally the gating factor, the critical path is staff time. And I think that we would be better off to minimize the number of subcommittees so that council members have to make trade-offs of their own time first before we perform a denial of service attack on city staff. The second point is the traffic.
Point of clarification on that. Are you saying that this scenario is a minimization of subcommittees?
Thanks for asking. I think that if we actually wanted to minimize, I'd strongly recommend that we move the stormwater utility item into capital projects and actually traffic as well. And say there could be two council members who worry about capital projects and stormwater and traffic. I suggest that because the traffic committee of all became very popular a few years ago when everyone was concerned about cut through traffic. We haven't really had traffic subcommittee or committee of the whole meeting since then. And so it's kind of a head fake on here. And so I think that putting thank you for asking, putting traffic and stormwater together with capital might make sense. I think that rules and guidelines, I agree with you, is going to be a de minimis effort. I think it should be there so there's somebody to field requests and problems. And I'll leave it at 2 instead of 3. Thank you.
So I think we've kind of covered the direction you're going to take on committees. Okay.
Just a point of clarification based on your rules and guidelines. Section 1.6, the mayor pro tem appoints committee members. Committees are formed by majority vote of the council, and committees are dissolved by majority vote of the council. So just to give you a little framework about what you're discussing tonight.
We'll do that now and February. Dissolving. We're running late.
I would say this real quick though, I know we're running late, but on the traffic, like I'm not convinced you need a separate formal subcommittee to be full, but one of the common themes I hear from residents is traffic. You know, and so I'm hopeful that, you know, maybe it's something in between, right? An in-betweener, so to speak. And folding it into something like that would be good. But
I totally hear you. I think that the challenge is that it's going to hit the same staff member really hard. And rather than have 2 sets of council members asking Sean for stuff.
I get it, but you can't control the residents' feelings, right? So
I really hope that 2 council members can listen to residents and make it actionable. If there's listening, then there's the follow through. Follow through is right there. Okay, but I hear you.
Okay. Let's move on the assignments because those are subcommittees for the council. There are some regional groups that council members do participate in. That we'll be looking for some volunteers to jump in and help. These are regional committees, specifically like I've been on MISWAC since I joined council. That's a Metropolitan Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Works directly with the King County Solid Waste Department and reviews garbage collection activities as well as recycling direction. Affects every resident here. It's very interesting. The first meeting of the year is on Friday, and again, that's when I'm looking forward to have somebody jump in and take my role on these meetings, which are every Friday, 11:15 to about 12:45. Every second Friday of every month.
Virtual?
Virtual, all virtual. So, pretty interesting group. I found it interesting and I've learned a lot. Go ahead.
So my suggestion is that for these regional committees, if someone could send out mail to council saying for each of these, this is when the regularly scheduled meeting is, it'll be easier to get a volunteer. Sorry.
I agree. And I was just trying to make sure that there's, NORCOM is no longer, I understand from the chief that is, community representation is going away. So they're the group, I think, that handles 911 and other types of issues. So I heard that today. So that's, anyway, so these committees, I think maybe what we would want to do, I agree with you. Send out a message describing the committees, what we're looking for. You're on, whether you're going to stay on.
Yeah, ETP and yeah, I mean, I even have a question about, WRA is basically salmon recovery, and there are a tremendous number of salmon streams that run through Clyde Hill. I don't know that we really have that much input into that. I mean, it's interesting if if you're in ecology minded and want to do that. And a lot of these ETP also is more about, ETP is actually rather interesting because it talks about regional controls, regional transit. A lot of those at the end of the day is about legislative priorities and our input into the state based on legislative priorities. Again, from the city of Clyde Hill, we get, this much. It is kind of an interesting.
Okay. And there are two, I'll call them financial issues here, that are bullet points here. Tertiary check center, I believe you're that right now. You might be. It's kind of,
I thought he's secondary as mayor pro tem.
go ahead.
So
Why don't you
right-
describe
right-
what we need here?
Right now, we need a third signer for in the absence. Some of our checks require two signers, the mayor and myself. In the absence of one of the two of us and the need for that, that's when we pull in the tertiary signer. So it's used pretty rarely, but it does give us a safety valve.
Is there any reason why that same check signer can't be the check reviewer?
I think that it should be, yeah, that would make sense.
Volunteer if you want.
Yeah, it's fine.
Do we need a motion to appoint him or are we good with
Uh,
just?
no, I think this is just purely administrative.
Great.
So
Thank you.
for clarification, are we changing him to the check reviewers?
That's fine too.
So I'll have you work, direct all the staff on
Yeah.
this one to take care of that.
It's actually good visibility into budget.
You'll get good.
I figured there'd be a link, which, Mayor, if you don't mind, I had a whole question about the regional committee. Are there any committees out there that aren't on the list, or maybe they're on the
Yes.
list, that maybe intersect with, one topic would be finance. Topic two would be, I know it's a random thing, trees and views, so that we could get, and maybe there's no such thing out there, and I'm just sort of a rando comment, but it's a tree, we're going to be talking about tree policies and tree codes and trees and views and all that stuff. Are there committees out there where we could get learnings and things like that? It's an off the wall question, but I don't know, or we could take it up later, do some research.
Well, I don't have an answer for
Okay,
it, so I can, I would love, there are other committees. I remember when I joined council, they asked what committees I wanted to be on, and I said, what do we need?
I can't think of anything that's trees and views. I mean, because that's pretty, there aren't a lot of cities that.
It's pretty narrow.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, this whack, they're into composting, that'll make trees and views.
I was thinking compost, and I didn't want to, I was saying, you were the compost guy, but, okay, that's, all right. But maybe if city administration can think of anything that intersects, I'm just looking for things that might be of benefit to this body and our residents.
What I would propose is that we send a message out to the council that says, these are the groups that we can be involved with.
Okay.
And that includes the ones who, some of you talked here, there's some other ones. And we can provide information that might suggest those that have relevance to Clyde Hill.
Fair enough. I'll do some
You
research.
can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 9.4, OPMA, Public Records Requirement Discussion. I think this is an area that I need the assistance of the city attorney on to describe. This is not a long discussion tonight.
I think, and Dean, you may want to just chime in. Once every 4 years, I believe, each elected municipal official is supposed to get training on the Open Public Meetings Act and on public records. And we have to verify that. I can't remember exactly how we verify it, but it's a straightforward training, takes about a half an hour. And we can incorporate that into the retreat. If you have a retreat, we could do it as a workshop prior to a council meeting or as a separate session.
Actually, the links are actually pretty good too. If you want to do, I actually took the links. I took the links today.
Links.
I took the links today. It's actually pretty quick and very thorough.
So just there, this is almost a healthy public reminder that each of the five of us should go and follow the links that Maya sent and do the coursework and send the certification into the city. Great.
And then please send me your certificates. Thank you.
Took care of mine today. So by the way, speaking of that, yeah, the Washington Cities, Organization of Cities or something like that, they have, that's the training that I went through just online, took a Saturday morning to go through. There was all over the state actually, and a lot of people were in person, but I just jumped online and it was fine. And then I just requested my certificate and they sent me a certificate that I sent to Maya just today.
Great.
So easy. Well, easy.
Very good.
So there are lots of options.
Great.
that don't require me to train, it's fine with me. So Dean or Mike can lead you to those.
9.5, retreat. This is a topic that has come up since I joined council, about having a council retreat every year. It never comes to fruition. The question, I think this should be the last time we talk about having a council retreat, unless we have one. So it just seems like we've spent more time talking, we could have had a retreat by now. So the city administrator put a memo together to kind of outline his thoughts on how to proceed with a retreat, offsite at a time. The purpose of this is to have a discussion about whether we want the retreat, kind of start to consider some of the topics, how we want to conduct the retreat. And as I said, city administrator did a good job of really kind of laying out recommendations and suggestions on how to proceed with this. I think that if we're going to do it, we should have it soon, by February, sometime in February, or we're going to lose the benefit of what we're trying to think about doing for the year. We're a new council. It's a good time. New council there. We're all fresh to this group, full of ideas. It's really a good time to probably get together and start to figure out how we work together to do what's right for the community. So, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just thought that this seemed like an opportunity in time when we have a completely new council and mayor, and it might be a good time to go through all kinds of things. We've talked to at least one person so far as a potential facilitator. That person has reinforced to us that, again, we just threw topics out there. They reinforced that they like to be able to speak to staff, speak to each of the council members individually, the mayor, and to try and help identify an agenda based on what we feel our needs are. I know that we've talked about one of our biggest priorities being, how best all to work together, and this seemed like one really good way to try and bond together on sets of strategic goals and priorities.
Okay.
Go ahead. Look, I'm not opposed to a retreat. I would be reluctant to have it contain what I'll call table stakes, the onboarding and the basics. That's why I think a lot of us, we've been in the city, we've been involved, we're working together. I think we'll figure it out. My own view is that, if there are topics in there that were a little more hard hitting in terms of deep dives, maybe, and I won't, in the interest of time, I've got some ideas and notions, but so I'm not opposed to retreat, but would not prefer the table stakes type stuff.
I think given the three of us are new and you're new to being mayor, it would be worth taking at least some time offline to get to know each other and understand what each other thinks our priorities are.
I would agree. No, I would agree. I think I think the biggest challenge is going to be to figure out what the topics are, because there are many, many, many topics we will deep dive on. I mean, including, we're going to have a discussion later, tree codes, should we not? There's just a lot of things that are at play. And so it would be interesting also not only to have topical discussions, but also to make sure that we set priorities, kind of our legislative agenda for the year to set priorities.
I like it. It's proactive, and yeah, I think anytime that we can discuss how to make the city better and more efficient, I think it's time well spent.
I'm going to go to one of the expressions you used a lot during calendar 23, which is, what problem are we solving? I think getting really clear on what problem we're solving would be good. I don't think we're going to do it right now. I agree with Councilmember Remoto around the agenda is important. I think that incorporates what Councilmember Sinwell focused on. My suggestion is that you say, yes, we'll do a retreat offsite, we'll get it on the books. In terms of the agenda, I think that it might make sense to choose 2 council members. I'll suggest the mayor pro tem plus whoever he chooses to just be a subcommittee around, yep, this agenda makes sense. This looks like a good use of time. Let's go. That's how I was, so just in development of the agenda and all that, that would be my suggestion to make sure that there's absolutely full confidence that we really are solving the problem, solving the right problem, and solve it the right way. The thing that I'm not clear about, and I think that was one of the issues as we had the recurring conversation, is every discussion of an offsite was balanced by, and here are all the commitments that we're now pushing out. Here are all the deliverables that we're now pushing out, because the time that goes into putting together an offsite had a direct cost in other deliverables that we were talking about. I don't think we can answer that right now, but it's good to understand that fully burdened cost. Thank you.
So, go ahead. I would like to, so I have no problem helping facilitate that conversation, although I'd like to maybe change the dynamics of who's creating the agenda. And I would like to make sure we have a city administrator, we have 2 council and the mayor. However we do that. Because I think that's a pretty good balance in terms of setting the agenda.
Sounds great to me. Thank you.
So the city administrator recommended we bring in a facilitator, and the facilitator would reach out to create an agenda. Does it make sense? Is that a more efficient way, maybe with the 4 of us? The committee and meetings and focus on the direction in the agenda that would be created, on the assumption that this facilitator really kind of can talk to people and then can come back with those types of, as opposed to bringing us together and trying to argue it out, but in a sense that's kind of debated. Have somebody bring in the debates into the agenda. Does that make more sense?
I like it because I think the facilitator probably has experience working with other cities. I'm assuming that's kind of what they do. So they would bring a different perspective that would, bring up things that we won't think about if it's just a group of 4 of us.
What about everybody else?
Defer to the mayor pro tem.
That's the one thing I would say too about maybe having the facilitators. It might take some of the burden off of the city administrator to make it happen.
He's already got to find one. But he's volunteered to do that, so he drew the short straw. Yeah. All right, so
We had also talked about a couple of potential dates of like the 29th and 1st or the 28th, 29th, the end of February. I think they're in here, right?
Yeah.
29th and March 1st. So can everyone just kind of look through your schedules when you get a chance to shoot me something if one's a hard no on those. I'm sorry, what was it?
Thursday, February 29th, Friday, March 1st.
Correct, yep.
what I would suggest
One
is send out, send out kind of a hold these dates and see who might be available. It seems, and I'm assuming attendees at a retreat like this, and please jump in if you don't agree, would be council, guess I get to go, and then department staff, department meeting.
And this would be one of those 2 days, not both.
one of those days.
Right, but why don't we have staff reach out and put the timing together rather than us having to remember to send you this. Great. So just move it along.
All right, so I'll ask kind of a loaded question. Do we need, based on the topics, would it make sense to have, say, planning commission chair, civil service chair, those also? That's a question. I don't know.
That's a good point.
I don't know how you answer that without having the agenda.
Yeah, that's a good, well, yeah, based on the agenda, I think maybe we might want to include some of those, especially if we're getting, if we are going to talk about collective bargaining, then obviously we want civil service commission in there perhaps. So anyway, I'm just throwing that. That's a good.
Those were just potential topics, not set in stone.
Okay, well, yeah, so maybe we make that decision after the facilitator decides what the topic is.
Very good.
On this, so understanding that process, facilitator will work with two council members and the city administrator to come up with the draft agenda.
I don't know why the facilitator would reach out to everybody, council, and,
Okay.
I
I don't know.
I mean, unless that's going to be an exorbitant cost to do that.
We were trying to get everybody's opinions and what they felt the needs were for both the council and the city. So I don't know, that was the recommendation.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so now we want to, step one is find the facilitator. Step two is they reach out to the participants to get a sense of, and that can be done in groups or individually.
Do we need a motion to move this forward?
I don't think
No, you don't.
Thank you. 9.6. So we got some committee updates and especially land use committee. And I think it's important. Is there something? I'm sorry.
Oh, so go ahead. Oh, so this is just jumping straight into land use, and thank you, Councilmember Roboto, fellow land use subcommittee member on this. Out of the interest of time, I'm going to trust that anyone who's interested in what happened at the last land use subcommittee meeting will just read those minutes. I want to talk about the item around tree code priority. I don't know if other council members got feedback from the community. I certainly got several earfuls about this. I think that some of the people, some of the residents in the audience might be here about this topic. There's a really good write-up of Eagles, Trees and Developments from Yarrow Point. I wanted to offer a point of view around why this is coming to council and where it's coming from and what I think our conversation is right now. This is not coming from Councilmember Road, and I think we need to have a tree code. I don't think this is coming from staff saying, oh, wow, you should really do a tree code. I think this is coming from the absence of the tree code and things that we're seeing around us and in neighboring communities and sister cities and feedback from residents. The gist of this conversation is if we, do we not want to touch the tree code at all and leave it be? Or do we want to say, yes, and I'm going to bias this conversation and say, after the comp plan and after the very necessary high priority Title 17 changes related to changes in state laws for housing, do we want the Planning Commission to have on their docket and their work plan a tree code in addition to the other Title 17 mop-up cleanup items that are currently expected or lingering to be there? This topic came up at the land use subcommittee meeting. Councilmember Muramoto and I looked at each other and said, wow, this is really gnarly. We don't feel comfortable making this recommendation. We'd like the full council to consider it. In order to provide some guidance or some structure on this, what I want to suggest is that I want to play back some of the feedback I've gotten from residents about this. One is, if you're going to, one is like, what would be involved in a tree code? I think that Medina's tree code is a great thing to look at. Kirkland has one in place. I think the city of Bellevue, it's my understanding that they either have one in place or in the process of updating it right now. Mercer Island has my understanding, a well-written tree code as well. The gist is around protecting the tree canopy and helping balance the rights of private property owners and the community good of having trees. This came to a very acute point in Yarrow Point because there were trees on private property that had eagles' nests, and people in the community were unhappy with lots getting clear cut. And you can read that document from there of Yarrow Point. My suggestion as an N of one, this is not a subcommittee consensus because you and I haven't had a chance to discuss this, based on feedback from residents. I think that we do want to pursue a tree code. I think we want to ask the planning commission to work through this and say, yes, this is what we'd like out of a tree code, or no, don't touch this. I think it is super important that this takes into account views and the view code. I've heard from residents that our current comprehensive plan is very explicit around tree protection, but doesn't seem to have any code to follow through on that. And so we should address that ambiguity. Residents have pointed out the tree codes of neighbors, Medina, Kirkland, Mercer Island. And several residents also brought up concerns about air quality. And that fundamentally, this is about priority, not, hey, let's do a tree code and you just take one off the shelf. It's after the comp plan, after the Title 17 changes for state housing laws, along with everything else, please, Planning Commission, go look at the tree code. That's my attempt to frame our conversation. I'm not sure if you want to correct or tweet any of that. Thank you.
I mean, look, in the last 6 months, this is a priority of many residents, the tree code, the balancing of views and trees. This, I do want to point out though, sequentially though, maybe it isn't really sequential because this is why this comp plan matters. Because it'll make conceptual assertions.
Yes.
That will relate to maybe a tree code that might not be fully baked.
Correct.
So we're going to have to be thoughtful about trees and views as we consider the comp plan language, because the language, we have to live with that for 10 years minimum. So I don't point that out. The other thing, the last comment I'll make, the minutes were well done, by the way, so thank you, very informative. I felt like I was at the meeting on that one. I did see something about and this came up at an earlier meeting, about the urban forest grant. And I don't want to debate it here, we can talk about it later. I get worried that that's what should come first. Should the tree code come first, and then you worry about that urban forest stuff? Because it seems like there's a cart and a horse there. And I worry about workload and a shiny red ball on a grant, sucking up opportunity costs in terms of all the things we have to, I'm concerned about that. I know you look at the money, go, man, I want to grab that money. It's free money. I can do something with it. But we have a lot of priorities, and I worry that if you do that first, how does that, does that trap us somehow in the tree code? And are the two even that related, by the way? I'm not even sure they are. When I read it, right? That's it.
So, I don't know, I want to make sure everyone gets their comments in here. Do you have any comments?
What he said.
So just roughly here, I think what you're looking for is there consensus that a tree code should be put in the work plan? I think that's what the question is.
At some point, yes. But I mean, right now we're discussing when you discuss, and I want to make sure all the council members have their chance to comment before I jump in and move on. Did you have anything? Okay, now we're there.
Great. So this is not, the tree code should look like this. I think this is a recommendation of whether a tree code should be put on that docket. I don't know if you just want to do a head nod or a vote or a motion.
I think this is a head nod type of thing. And if we think it's a priority to start adding into our group, that we should do so. I completely agree from my standpoint. It is a topic of conversation. And every time somebody drives by a new development, in which all the trees have been cut down, it's almost like you see the neighbors all crying next to each other. This looks terrible. It elicits the comments. There is on the other hand, the question of how do you put something together and how do you make it work, as opposed to people who perceive that doing something to do with trees is going to affect views. And I know that's an issue too, and that has to be considered. That's the vote. Yeah.
You just reminded me, there's one other nuance to point out here. The tree code doesn't necessarily mean, hello, private property owner, I know you thought you owned your property, but you're not allowed to do this.
Right.
It could be, when you remove that tree, please go ahead and add other trees in a different location, at a different height, because we want to have, that there is common good about having some set of trees. It's not a purely restrictive, there's a lot of gray space between,
And the purpose of making it a priority to discuss is because it needs this discussion.
we totally agree with the community on this.
I think if we don't listen to the community, this is one where the community, there's lots of opinions. And one. All right. Is there anything else here? Moving forward, planning commission appointment and confirmation today. And so there was we moved forward on the planning commission. We had two open positions. One was an expiring position held by a commissioner, as well as an open position because of the election of council member Olson. And so city went out to solicit applicants for the planning commission. We received 4 applications. And let me just make it clear here. As mayor, I am the one who appoints the commissioners to the open positions. Council confirms the appointment. So in terms of the applications we received, what I did with the applications, besides of course reviewing them, is I solicited the opinion of others on the capability of the applicants. And this included Mayor Klaus. She helped me and gave me some insight into the candidates. What I did, I looked at their experience, I looked at their capability to support the work of the planning commission, and that work is super important. The planning commission also, if you look at the work coming down the pipe, they have a lot of work to do. And I wanted the individuals who had the experience that I thought would support a thorough and efficient review of the items brought to the planning commission with a focus on not only reviewing, but moving these things forward and bringing them to the permission of to the approval of the council. This is never an easy decision, especially to select from a list of applicants who are seeking to serve the city. For those not selected, I appreciate their past service to the city, and I'm hopeful that we'll consider other opportunities to serve our community. So as I said, as mayor, I'm tasked with selecting the commissioners, and council will can confirm my selection. And I've selected Mark Cruz to fill the vacant open seat, and Jared Wheeler to fill the remaining term of the seat that was previously held by Councilmember Olson prior to his election to the city council. Also, I want to point out that the mayor is charged with selecting the chairman of the planning commission. This is not subject to council approval. Current Commissioner Amy Kwan has served this role admirably. She's responsible, she's professional, and she works as effectively as she can. And I've asked her to continue as chairman, and I'm pleased that she has agreed. So again, thank you to all those who applied, and I ask for a motion to approve Mark Cruz and Jared Wheeler to council, to the planning commission, pardon me.
So moved.
So moved. We have a motion. Second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is passed. And Jared, I see you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you. And very much appreciate the opportunity, Mayor, and the council's support and confirmation. Thank you.
And so now we have a full planning commission, and they got a lot of work to do. Section 9.8. Moving on. Oh, yes. There's a request for a quick break. Can we take 5 minutes? Okay. We'll move quickly as we can through the rest of this. All right, we're back after the break. I think we were going to move on to section 9.8 comprehensive plan monthly update. Have it up here. Was it Maya?
Yeah, I can speak to that one.
Thank you.
So not much for this month. It's been a holiday period, so it's been a little slow going by design. We are gearing up to bring the transportation element chapter to the Planning Commission at the end of the month. We did update the schedule. There wasn't any big changes there. But the big thing I did want to mention is that there's been some discussion about what we want to do to involve council members at this early point in starting review of some of the chapter drafts. And there's been a little bit of back and forth, and we talked to the land use committee meeting about committee members about it. And I think where we landed is to go ahead and send out the available drafts, element chapters, but focusing mostly on the goals and policies in those chapters for a high level review by individual city council members via email, and then any feedback or high level ideas or suggestions can be exchanged that way and kind of fed into the process of the Planning Commission before it comes back to council. So if that is agreeable to everybody, then I will send out those drafts by the end of the week.
That sounds reasonable.
I do have one, it's a little bit off topic, but during land use, we brought up that Excel spreadsheet of legislative mandates and mandatory versus non-mandatory. That would be wonderful to send out to council and the Planning Commission to kind of kick that off. I don't know if Eric had a chance to kind of restructure that, but I think and I'm sure it will drive more questions and more answers at this point in time, but I think that's a great document to share with council whenever it's available.
Sure. I know he's working on updating it, and I know his plan was to have it updated by the end of the month,
Okay.
Along with some other things that he was working on. I'm happy to send out what we have already. I think the latest version we did for the Planning Commission as a tool to reconsider.
And for those that you haven't seen it, it basically goes through the legislative mandates that the House and Senate passed. And it basically gives kind of a quick description. It gives when it's due. So it'll show you on the horizon. We have a whole bunch of things that are coming due in 2025. And whether it applies or whether it's like, doesn't really apply. So, and I think it will help weave this thing about, Planning Commission and comp plans and Title 17 and all that other thing. It's kind of, it's a thing that's directing a lot of those things. So it was a confusing document. We asked Eric to kind of make some tweaks to it to help it be more, we'll call it understandable. So that's what that's all about.
So let me just make sure I'm clear, and then we can go around. So there's a couple items here. So you'll send out the updates with a request that council focus on goals and policy, and that will go to the entire council to review.
The chapters, yeah.
For each of the chapters that are completed.
Drafts.
Okay. And timing on that?
By the end of the week, I'll send that out.
Okay. Any? Okay.
For discussion at the next meeting?
No, so this, as envisioned, is more of an individual council member by council member effort to do sort of offline. You, of course, have already reviewed them all as a Planning Commission member, but some of the council members have not had the opportunity, especially the new ones, to sit down with the available chapter drafts. And if there are high-level suggestions or ideas that come to mind on the goals and policies or on things that maybe have not been mentioned that might be a priority for Planning Commission to consider, it'd be helpful to know at the early stage. So I'll provide instructions in an email as a way to get that feedback back to me.
And then do you have a deadline for when you want the feedback back?
I have not thought that far ahead, but I will establish something when I send the email out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two comments or questions. So the information that we get, so that's been through the Planning Commission, right?
Right.
What would be helpful in the past, if it's possible, if not, I can probably find it somewhere. For the policies, if there's a way to get, for the ones that are declared as required by whoever, you guys or the consultant, if there's a way to get that to go with the document, So if, Vision 2050 has certain required policy items to put so that we can compare the language for our proposed policies to the language that's, either King County, Puget Sound, regional cities, or the state, that would be good to have. So we can consider the mandates versus our proposed policies. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. That might be a bit of a heavier effort. I don't know that we have all of that. So our consultant has been working through the checklist mandates and have put together their recommendations for goals and policies based off of those. But I don't know that at this point we have them all easily accessible that I could send out as a package.
But the checklists have been completed, I presume, correct?
Yeah.
A long time ago. Is there a way
Is
to
Eric on?
highlight those that
Okay.
relate to transportation?
I'm going to turn it over to Eric because he's online and he's.
Yeah, Eric's online, has his hand up.
The reason I ask is because it's difficult to look at those in a vacuum, right?
I understand.
You're just looking at words, but if you don't know the roadmap, it's sort of a problematic review. At least for me, it would be.
Well, and can I ask one other question too? How much of what the state passed last year have they actually given us enough implementation details so that we can make any decisions off of that?
So the legislation that the state passed last year is different to what we're talking about in terms of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So the checklist requirements for the comprehensive plan come from the Growth Management Act and Puget Sound Regional Council. And these have been in development and been around for some time.
Okay.
And then the legislative mandates are on top of that. That will come after we're finished with the comprehensive plan.
Got it. Thank you.
We have Eric.
Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Still there, Eric?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So just to recount what has been done so far on this process, about 12 months ago, a periodic update checklist was completed for the project. In addition, we have completed a policy gap analysis comparing the Vision 2050 PSRC metropolitan regional goals and policies along with King County countywide planning policies along with the city's own policies from the old 2015 plan. We identified gaps in those policies and instructions on which direction to go to cover those gaps. Any implementation guidance that has been provided by the Department of Commerce and PSRC, in addition to MRSC, has been shared and evaluated and is being utilized in our efforts. Finally, we have also completed an existing conditions report in support of the work that we're doing now. So there's 3 products that looked backwards towards what had been done previously, towards what's required, and then what we need to do to go forward. And all that material is available, and we can share that as needed.
So, yeah, my request was, as it relates to this element, to get the requirements, and if that's whatever it is, if it's the gap checklist, it sounds, that seems the most relevant, so that we could sort of review the gap checklist and look at the policies for the transportation element, just so we have a sense, a metric to compare against. Does that request is that too hard to do, or does that make sense?
Certainly, it makes sense. The work that we do is contingent and compliant with the policies that are established by both PSRC and King County. So there is a consistency standard that we do need to follow, and that's what we do when we help to build our new goals and policies going forward in the new update.
Yeah, I understand that. My point on this, though, is that I think there's flexibility in the language that one can use to develop the policy statement. And I want to compare our proposed language and our policy statements to the language that's suggested by or required the concepts that are required in the regulatory requirements. Generally, if I'm not mistaken, cities have latitude in how to write those policy statements. It's not verbatim.
Yes, absolutely. It's a perfect marriage between following state guidance and compliance to the countywide planning policies, as well as coming forward with local goals and policies directed by local preference and local perspectives.
I agree. So my point is that there's judgment applied, which I get. And I feel as a council member, I sort of want to assess that judgment as opposed to just wordsmithing elements in the transportation element policies. I mean, anyone can wordsmith. I think the value is to sort of assess the judgments. At least in my mind.
Understood.
So I want to try to figure out how do we accomplish what we need to accomplish, what you're trying to accomplish here to get some of that information. Eric, is that something that can be provided, or does the existing gap analysis provide that?
Yes, we could provide the periodic update checklist portion for transportation, as well as the policy gap analysis. And then, you'll be seeing our work as we draft towards providing the updates to this comp plan.
Is that?
Yeah.
So basically you send out the chapter draft, you send out the gap analysis related to the chapter, and then it can be reviewed by the team, by the council. Is that doable?
Yes, I think what I was thinking is, so tracing from the checklist to the specific goals and policies, I think there's a little bit of translation there, and it might not be immediately obvious what pairs with what and what goal and policy checks off a box on the checklist. So that might be the piece that we don't have. And Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've done that verbally in planning commission meetings to a large extent. I don't know that we have that written down anywhere currently.
Yes, that is correct. We've tried to be very clear with the planning commission what guidance and policies come forward as far as what we need to integrate into the comp plan update versus those goals and policies that are locally driven based on our own public perspectives and priorities at the city level.
So why don't we make this maybe you need another step along the way. Why don't we provide those two documents? And in theory, the council member could listen to the planning commission meeting on that topic and get the background that maybe he's missing, or he can follow up with questions that we can talk about how to follow up with questions later.
I've done that. And that information, it's reliance upon, it's a reliance model. And so, look, how many elements are there in transportation? There's not that many. It's not even that controversial of an element, right? How many goals are in elements?
We have not completed it yet. We're working on it now.
How many policies are in the transportation elements?
It's not prepared yet. We're preparing it now.
But is this one that we're going to get in a few days or
No,
next
we're
week?
going to get the ones that have been completed
Okay.
for overall review on focus and policies.
So which ones are we getting now? Which elements?
So it's land use, parks and open space, introduction, capital facilities and utilities, the ones that have been reviewed by planning commission.
Okay. So my only sense is there's not a lot of, I can do it myself because I think the information's out there. I mean, but that's kind of the hard way. And I was hoping for a shortcut.
And it seems that you can get the information they relied on to put that together is really what you're asking for. That's what I think you're.
Yeah, so the best I can describe, right. The state, three bodies have requirements, judgments are made, and then our language was given birth to.
So what I'm going to propose is you send the draft, you send the information behind it, which would be the gap analysis.
Okay.
Look that over, and then we can discuss whether there's something more you need or not. And move this, and we can make a decision at that point.
Okay, that'll be helpful, yes.
Okay. So I'm sorry, is there any other comments?
No.
Nope. So. Okay. So we had, to go back, we had two topics we from the consent agenda that we moved on.
Yeah.
Onto this, under 9.9, we moved the consideration of the motion to approve the minutes from December 12th, 2023, for the regular council meeting. So, Councilmember Singleton, you asked to move that. I'll let you.
I could take a crack at this. It's up to you.
Sure.
I'll check because you and I talked about it briefly during one of the recesses.
Okay.
There are a lot of ways of delivering on minutes. I really appreciate these minutes. I think that the challenge here is by the time we get around to voting on these minutes, it's a really inopportune time because it's 4 weeks after the meeting and we're eager to get on to the real business that's ahead of us. I feel pretty confident that these minutes weren't written last week, right before the packet went out. I want to suggest it might be helpful if even a draft, whenever the draft is ready of the minutes, goes out to council closer to when the meeting actually happened, because that's when we might be able to provide some feedback of some kind. I think that's one of the topics that we discussed in terms of hope. Like seeing it here now, it's suboptimal in a whole bunch of ways. I think there's another thread around a pattern that you called out, Councilmember Sinwell, around something you saw in the City of Medina minutes, which is that in the minutes, they call out action items. So it's not just, oh, this discussion happened, but here's an action that we expect to take. And that makes it easier on skimming the minutes after the fact, and then meeting to meeting, hey, we said we would do this, did we actually do this? Those are the two, what I'll call, I'm sure there was a lot more that you had, but I just wanted to front load those two because they made a ton of sense to me and I understood them pretty quickly.
Yeah, just the third item is that, yeah, I do appreciate the minutes. And we all understand what minutes are for. They're not to rehash the entire meeting. When I read these minutes, Mayor, I don't think it was missing some observations by council. It was robust in the discussion by city administration. That was well done out there, but generally, like particularly on the comp plan, I'll point that council members had a discussion. And so when I thought about this, I said, well, maybe the issue would, maybe to address this. And I'm not looking for 100. No one wants lengthy minutes. Yeah, no. But on the other hand, I think minutes probably should reflect, key points or observations. I think we agree with that. And so maybe if it's possible, going forward, we could have a process where council could get draft minutes, some advanced time where we could provide commentary. But the overarching point was that they seem to be lacking in terms of some things that were said, concerns, observations, et cetera. Anyway, that was the observation about the minutes.
Again, I don't. Mr. Rolla? Yeah. Might help along with this.
Honestly, first I've heard of it, so I mean, we can certainly take a look at them and get back to you.
From an operational standpoint, the concept of adding actions so that as a team, as a group, we all know kind of the next steps we're going to take instead of all of us relying on our notes that we all take and put little star marks next to the things you want to make sure you do next month. That's what I do. And so that might be productive, particularly productive use time. Is it unreasonable to assume a draft could come out, 2 weeks later? I don't, if the meetings are drafted earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, does it change the behavior of the person who puts the minutes together?
No, I would think we could get something out to you earlier before the meeting.
I think that would be great. I think it would also enable to your specific example, you'd be able to look at the minutes and say, no, actually, there are 2 points that I wish were in these minutes, then you can offer as feedback. And then
I would have added a couple of things on the comp plan.
okay, and so if we do those two, I think that would be a great start.
So let's assume the minutes, the draft of the minutes comes out within 2 weeks of the meeting instead of 4 weeks, a month later. And it comes out, something to that effect.
That'd be great.
So that you have enough time to do it. And then council has the right to comment, and those comments would then just go into the packet for the next meeting for approving the minutes. That's the way I think you would do it. That makes sense? Okay.
I just have one other thing. I move to approve the December 12, 2023 regular city council meeting minutes, because we didn't do that back in consent. We should
Right.
button it up. So
I'll
make
second that.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Just have it.
All those in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm abstaining
You're abstaining. Okay, we won't.
Four.
for the reasons I just stated.
Anybody opposing? Okay, that is approved. Here's, I have to put my little star thing.
Action item, add action items.
Okay. 9.1. Consideration of motion authorizing the mayor to execute funding agreement number WQSW CAP 2325 Clyde Hill with the Department of Ecology. So this, okay, we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second, any discussion?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I had 2 questions, maybe for the finance director. It said, I got confused, I think it's on page 76 of the materials. And it says it's no net impact to the 2024 budget. But then there were words that said $130,000 in revenue was included in the budget and that certain expenditures were included. So the caveat of certain, I'm just trying to reconcile no impact to the budget and the word certain on expenditures on I guess it's that last sentence. I was just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I can handle that one. I wrote those words. So we haven't identified every dollar we're going to spend of the 130. So this is a substantial increase from most years that we've had this most bienniums. So for a long time, it was, I think it actually started like 35,000. It was 50 for a very long time. Last biennium, it went up to 75. Now all of a sudden it went to 130.
Right.
So not every single item's been identified yet, but we know we're going to spend it on pipe cleaning, catch basin cleaning, street sweeping. And last year that accounted really easily for the 75,000 in the last biennium.
So, I knew ecology really stepped up the grant.
Yeah.
So will you go beyond 130,000 or?
Well, not for this grant because it's only eligible for 130. We'll have more than that in expenditures in the storm system.
So this is fungible money and you'll qualify easily for 130 probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But your budget captures the 130 and all other expenditures. That's what this was trying to say, I think.
Yeah. So we just haven't lined up all of the expenditures yet.
Which is my next question. So thank you. So where is, I have 2 more real quick. Where is that grant money? Where in the budget line item is that located?
Storm division, right?
I believe
It's not in the operational, it's in
operations.
It's in the stormwater.
Yeah, we don't have a stormwater utility, so the stormwater is a general
So the
fund.
line item of 2020, we can see that. Okay. I looked for it. Okay, I'll go look again. Last question. On the grant terms and conditions of the grant, it lists a series of items where you can spend the money.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the items was I think the creation or maintenance of a stormwater utility. Do we intend on spending any of that money in this regard, or is it for
We
We're
might.
not ready for that, it's a maybe, okay.
Yeah, it's a maybe. Yeah, so for the most part, we have a lot of our funding from the King County Sub-Regional Opportunity Fund, a different grant funding, or actually it's property tax levy.
Okay.
So that's what's paying for a majority of our stormwater utility plan. The
Okay, I get
plan or
it.
how
So the answer is you may dabble, you may be able to use some of this money to help fund that initiative.
exactly. We're also looking at a possible equipment purchase for like a pipe camera that's better than the push camera we have. Again, we're dealing with a little bit more money.
No, it's a nice grant to have, congratulations. Okay, that's it, that's what I got. Thanks.
So, vote. So vote, so you can accept the grant.
Oh. What about your ear, Dean?
First time I've ever heard that.
Thank you. All right, yes, do we have a motion to approve the acceptance of the grant?
So,
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Grant accepted. Very good. So on staff reports, administration reports. We'll start with 10.1 administrator report.
All right. So we kept it relatively short this past week with a lot of people being out and the holidays and everything. And we've spent a lot of time, obviously, with the transition in mayors and council members. Still working on some of the laptops, getting those all out. We had a really large public records request related to the former mayors, everything, basically. And then we also have, we're thinking along those same lines of new year, new mayor, new everything, new council. Does the admin report, as you've been getting it weekly, is it's meeting your needs? Is it more than you need, less than you need? Just thought we'd throw that out there for some discussion. It's kind of morphed into almost a weekly newsletter of sorts.
Council? I'm going to make Council 1 do it. Who's going to get called on first? If she can pass if she wants.
And since Councilman is new at this, I have nothing to say.
It's okay.
Yeah, oh, I do appreciate this report. It's helpful, it's useful. You know, it's, you know, and there's a lot of potential to your point. And it was a great question to ask, and it's one that I might need a little more time to deliberate on. The instant answer, Dean, would be, what is, at least for me, what's not super helpful is maybe the upcoming meetings and the time and all that stuff. I mean, maybe that's just a me thing. What would be, the other thing that came instantly to mind, we talked about the minutes and action items, and maybe that's the place for it. But maybe this could be a mechanism to track, you know, things that are open or activities or something like that, you know, open. I'm babbling here because I don't have a great answer for it, but I know this is a great vehicle, and I would love to keep the weekly report. And I know there's some ideas I have, but that was just one of them, where you would capture, you know, maybe like requests from residents or something like that. I had to think about it a little more deeply, and it was a big question to ask. I'll put it that way. And I got the question on Friday, so.
So
Go ahead.
I do have one quick off the top of my head, because I think it's really helpful to get the weekly report as well. The piece that I'm not seeing anywhere in the packet is I want like a one section dashboard of dates that we're driving towards and progress towards meeting those goals for comprehensive plan and for whatever Title 17 and because I don't have, and maybe we need to have the list of priorities from the retreat and agree on what we're going to try and accomplish this year. And then we can have that, the weekly administrators report be the place where we have a dashboard to track how we're getting towards any of those goals.
I hear what you're saying. But as the receiver of many status requests in my life at Deloitte from senior partners, a lot, you know, you almost get to the point of, man, so great idea, but maybe there's a way where we could say, maybe that's every other report or every third report.
Fair.
So you have like
Totally fair.
a mini report in the interim weeks, and the Maxi report, and we, something like that. So, right?
Yeah, no, my intent is not to
Yeah, I know.
overburden, right? But to at least get enough information so we know how we're tracking.
Let's move on and get some more comments.
I think it's fine, but I like the idea of a dashboard of sorts. But
Maybe something with, I know, we come out with a list of items that we're working on, but not in, and you even say, it's not in a particular order of prioritization, and there's probably a reason for that. I would like to see a list in prioritized, which are the items that are the most, closest to being finished, and highest priority. That would be a nice way to organize that list. That's my only comment.
would that be a good thing to put on the new website? Perhaps.
Which now, the administrator's report or the?
No, the priorities and progress to priorities. So rather than having a detailed list, put it into the new website so we can see here's the priorities, here we are, here's what we're tracking to, so that it's,
So I envisioned anyway, and we're not quite that far in the process yet, but the city administrator site would actually have a page, right? But it'll link to these reports more easily than trying to go find them through the document center. Traditionally, or at least for the last few years, we've been doing that spreadsheet that kind of did some version of a Gantt chart. There's been several iterations of it that listed, and it's always been the balance between what's the everyday stuff or the all the time stuff, and what's the project things that we're working on. So we haven't put this into that spreadsheet template yet. Loosely, I would say this is in a priority order, at least loosely. And the one of these that probably isn't, that's more of a work thing is a required thing being like the audit. The rest of these are all some version pretty high of priorities, not just to-do lists, right? It's whether they're coming through the budget or through the, what we're saying is the priorities of the city. Some of them morph on I'll be honest, sometimes even daily basis, when we suddenly learn that the county wants, a rate structure for a stormwater or something like this. So they kind of goes like this, and that might happen in an individual week. So always having them in the set order is difficult to keep them there. The spreadsheet, kind of back to some of the original questions, did line out, when we anticipate starting, when we anticipate working on them, and hopefully getting them finished over the course of the year. So I anticipated that we'd make another one of those charts. I just wasn't quite sure what it was going to look like yet.
Yeah, so I feel for you because I think you're getting a bunch of contradictory feedback across the council, and I have no idea how I would react or take action against contradictory feedback. So I'll try to somehow fit into
give
that.
one more contradictory feedback.
Yeah. One, the administrator's weekly report is super helpful. If you made 0 changes to how you execute on that report, it would continue to be super helpful and great. And I totally respect spending a whole bunch of energy on all the other efforts that are going on. The weekly report as is, from my point of view, would be more than good enough. I think the place to spend some energy that would be helpful is whatever the evolution is of that, what you described as the Gantt chart. Because like the admin weekly report totally makes sense. It gives you the freedom to say, look, this just happened, or we just found out about this, right? Don't change it. The Gantt thing, candidly, has not provided additional insight or help in terms of making sense of, so what's going on? So what's it like? I don't know what questions it answers. And so I'd be totally fine keeping admin weekly report as is. And just, in the spirit of how gang discussions like this go, I think that if you, Mayor, Honorable Mayor, and you, sit down and say, okay, how do we, and I'm offering that because, Mayor, you made a comment to me around how even 1 week in, you have much better insight around here's all the activity that seems to be demanded from the state and from the county, as Commissioner Olson has pointed out. And then here's all the activity that actually helps residents. And that's an unfortunate dichotomy, but there's got to be some better way of reporting that out with instead of that Gantt chart. So that's my suggestion. Keep the admin weekly report as is, you know, keep going, and then the two of you say, all right, here, or two or N of you say, here's another cut of what we could do with the Gantt. That would be my suggestion.
It's, and actually, this is almost two conversations we're having. You're right. You're saying, you know, what do we do with the weekly report? How do we make that more useful? It's not only to us, but it's public, so it's to the community. And then how do we track our key projects and priorities? The prior report was the target list. I'll make one comment. You has heard this before. You have only heard this before. Keep doing what you're doing until it's changed. It's a useful. Yeah, you use the weekly report for many things, but the most important piece is to communicate information that helps facilitate council meetings later. I think that's what you do a good job of. There's documents that you send out that you include in there, or comments that if you know, as you read the report, it translates back into what we're going to discuss later. So I kind of agree with Councilmember Akonovich that report is useful. There may be some sorting, there may be certain information. I have no problem with all the comments. You should do that. And let me get to the other part. This list is your list of projects and would normally be in what we call the target list. And as a council, we never discussed it. We just looked at it. It might be because it's 10:15 and we're tired. And sometimes it's just because we don't know what I don't think it really resonated in the way you want. I think the project list that we work on should be the list of projects that relate to the community most important. Councilmember Akonovich alluded to it. I mean, I've only been mayor for a week now, and there's a lot of work going on. Problem in this chart is a lot of that work is related to things that you have to do because it's state or county or some other requirement that the community is thrilled you're doing because we have to do it to continue to be a city. On the other hand, it doesn't mean much to them. So I don't know that you need to report on those things. I think you and I have to work on making sure those things get done. And so you guys are super busy doing all those things. And I'm not belittling that, but I think the things that are important are the key projects that we all keep talking about. And if we report and set those up in a format, a Gantt chart format, some format that we can report on progress, I think that'll that'll bring out the key items we want to talk about and may move us forward more effectively.
That sounds like a plan.
That's how I was thinking about this.
That was basically what I was sitting here scribbling, much better stated, yeah.
So anybody? So that's what I think we need to do. And I don't want to belittle all the work you guys do on the other items. And I can tell, and you know how we've talked about it. You guys are busy and you have to do it, you know. But the community just assumes they get done automatically, and we should make that assumption. So if there are questions on the administrative report, they should just say, if they want not just questions but comments, send it on, move it forward. I think the comments about priorities and certain key items is relevant. I don't want it to replace a packet in a council meeting, but it needs to help it along. So, any other comments? I'm sorry, staff did. Maya, thank you.
Yes, I just had one thing I wanted to mention is that as we're working on developing our new website, one of the things that I'm keeping in mind is that we want to do more in terms of communication to the public, directed at the public, you know, as the primary audience in terms of what's happening in the city. So it was mentioned that the administrator's report is also to the public, but really the primary audience currently is the city council. So I guess my question as we move forward, you know, reallocating existing resources, is there more we want to do on the website for the public and maybe pare down the admin report and kind of make that exchange? Or do we want to try and do more of everything? You know, I guess that's the question.
I would suggest that we can't really do more of everything because there are only finite of you. And in the spirit of the do what you're doing until it changes, keep doing the admin weekly report as is. It's great. And then as we know better, we have that other report, we can figure out how to optimize it for, that's my take.
And if you think about the way this is way down the road. You can take the concept of what you've been doing and what's evolving in the admin report could evolve into a newsletter for the community. If we can use it, it could be a new way to communicate back to the public, but I think would be a benefit.
I have one last item, just to make this longer. It's only time, right? So we were thinking also as part of, we're morphing towards the new website. And so we were thinking that for the February council meeting, which, forgive me, I don't remember the date. But we were thinking about maybe setting up the some photos opportunities to get like group photos of council members, individual ones, that sort of thing to put on the new website. We don't have anything on the walls in here or anything like that. It's kind of something that's kind of traditionally done, just to kind of commemorate councils as they go along. So we were thinking, I don't know, maybe like before the next meeting or something along those lines, just throwing some ideas out there for just kind of give people a heads up to, you know, trim up or whatever.
Glamour shot.
Yeah, glamour shot, yeah.
Tuesday, February 13th.
Oh, look, everybody be ready for Valentine's Day. So just stay tuned for more. If you absolutely hate the idea, tell me too, but that we're trying to spruce it up just a hair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Section 10.2's building report. I think it's in the packet. I don't think we need to have any further discussion. I think Rich is here. I'm not gonna be allowed to do that on the public works report because Sean's here. So he's
taking my time. Good evening, Mayor, council, members of the public here and online. So I'll be reasonably quick. Again, the year ended kind of with a whimper. It was pretty quiet, but we're roaring right back into weather. So something to just keep in mind is later on this weekend, there's really some high probability for some snow, ice, some inclement weather, real cold temperatures. So we're keeping an eye on that. We have some impact winds, but it was pretty minimal. There's a street closed right now, just in case anybody asked you. PSC is not sure whether they're going to come and fix the pole. There's a pole that's leaning about yay and looks like it's going to fall over.
Where is that?
It is on 15th between 98th and 97th. And so we have a signed closure and detour. But again, PSC was non-committal as to how long it would take to even bring a crew out. There's no power out and it's not fallen down. So it's not on their highest priority list, but it does not look remotely safe for somebody to drive around. So in case anybody asks you, that's what's happening at the moment. And again, we're already getting into kind of planning mode for this weekend with some staffing and some on-call items. So looking forward to that. Facilities, again, I'll try to be kind of quick, but we did reach out to our on-call architect, TCA, who did the City Hall remodel. And I've got a meeting with them, I think, next week to begin looking at the public works shop remodel and get us some kind of idea of what are our possibilities, some high level costs, things like that. So I expect that to move. There's a lot of public works items that are going to become stacked up here in council meetings. So I need to start moving some of them out, or otherwise we're going to have some super crazy meeting with contracts and bids. So trying to march them in one at a time if I can.
I hear you, and if it's better for you, we can do a special council meeting if that's right. There's no, like, this is important stuff.
Yeah.
And we've had study sessions, special council meetings for
Yeah, good. I appreciate it. It could be good for timing. So that's one item we're work on the parks pathway and lighting. Also another project that's this close to being ready to go out to bid. If I had my way and if things worked out, we would be bringing, potentially be bringing a bid results to council in February, potentially.
Could I ask one question about, so I understand that there's money from King County that is earmarked for parks-esque spending.
Yeah.
Right? I think in your former life as a council member, you asked a question about whether earmarked parks funds could be spent on trees that would be planted in whatever city has rights to do. And I'm not sure if we ever heard anything back on it, because I know that this is a great project, great. But then there's also the, hey, we have all these funds, so we want to do more trees in public spaces. I'm not, and a resident, I think, where is it? The letter from Julie Beffa, I think. It was either in the letter or in an email that she sent me. So I'm asking.
I mean, are trees allowed? Probably, but not probably as a standalone. I mean, the intent of the Parks Levy Fund is to leverage capital improvements and expansions to park property rather than restorative planting, something like that. Okay. Yeah, so the goal of it is to improve current facilities, trails, walkways, and park facilities. I don't really think trees alone would qualify for what the Parks Levy is.
Not going to argue, just
yeah.
asking.
Yep, no, fair enough. So again, this is another one of those projects that's kind of moving reasonably quick. Again, it was adopted in the budget. It leverages quite a bit of REIT funding. So again, that's something that we are pretty flush with, and this is one of those eligible expenditures. Storm, we have Kamens working down there right now, so we've run into a bunch of different interesting things, but they're doing stuff. They're making things work. We are waiting on a slip liner. So the problem with the project is those are pretty large companies that do this kind of work, and so they're multi-state or international, and so we're kind of small potatoes, and 170 or 200 and some odd feet of slip lining. So waiting for that. Oh, this is the piece. Yes. This is rather important. So we're working on the stormwater comp plan, and one of the items we had to try to work with King County to get on their billing roll for 2026. They kind of threw at us, we have to do an interlocal agreement, which we got yesterday, a draft of. We'll bring that to council in February for review and maybe moving forward. But the other piece is they said that we have to define a stormwater rate structure by February to be eligible for 2026. They did not say. They've not given us a February date.
End of February is what they said.
That's what I would like to believe, is end of February. So we have another meeting with King County coming up. I'm hoping next week, early next week, to define exactly what they're looking for. But what they've told us so far is we have to define the structure. So tiers, are we going to have 1 or 10 or just one rate? We have to define the structure, not necessarily the dollars and the cents of the utility. But we have to make some calls here that are really out of order for what we prefer. But your choice is 2027.
Okay, so just one question. After we define the structure, what is the soonest we were allowed to redefine the structure?
That is a great, so usually it has to be when you change your actual structure. I'm not sure. That might be a whole year, actually.
Right.
The rate itself is the October prior. So you can change rates a little more quickly, but the structure is, I'll have to find it.
Yeah, right now, they want it 2 years ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so just for the sake of expediency.
Yeah.
Right, and this is, I will look at council from it, like, they're asking for like what color to paint the bathroom while we haven't figured out what lot we're buying, right? So this is horrifically out of order. We do have taillights that we could follow. Yarrow Point has had a stormwater utility for 10-ish years. We could say whatever is good enough for Yarrow Point is good enough for us, since the alternative is 0. And if we have to redefine it in another 2 years, okay, but at least we're non-zero, and we begin getting revenue in 26 versus 27. And plus, that's the structure, not even the rates. You could argue that if we're really in the dark, the rate is 1 penny per like we do whatever the minimum is, so that residents actually, because we haven't figured out the whole, is there a utility board, blah, 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 blah. This is literally just to get the form in. And so one approach would be whatever Yarrow Point has, and we'll revisit it whenever we can after that. That is an expedient approach. But I am one council member, and we would need to have this discussion.
This is the algorithm, not.
This is just literally like, is everyone the same? You should You know this better, sorry.
So yes, that is a route. One of the things we talked about with FCS Group, who's our financial kind of end of this and the utility, is looking at some other models that they've used.
So I think his question was, what exactly is this structure? Like, what are we
I didn't know what
structuring?
they meant by rate structure.
It's tiers, so you can charge every single lot a flat fee, and it's one fee for everybody, or.
Are they looking just for the structure without numbers?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
that was the
And
question.
they indicated they want some sort of an overall revenue picture.
Like a ROM.
Right, and like for what it's worth, the last time I looked, it may have changed. Yarrow Point is just flat, every parcel is the
Right.
same, whether it's 2 acres or a tenth of an
And then they
acre.
modified it recently, right? They did a double.
Increase the rate, but not the structure.
Yeah, they increased
Right, they changed the rate, but not be everyone's flat.
Okay, I get it.
And there are all sorts of hyper creative things you could do where it could be like in county property tax, where it's a function of how much acreage you have. We could be wacky and say, what's your permeable, blah, blah, blah. But for right now, just to get on the books, we could say, we're like Yarrow Point, everybody's the same until they're not.
So the city, you guys are intending to fulfill this, meet the requirements, so we can be eligible for billing in 20
Yeah,
years.
and if it's helpful for a conversation, we can come back. I think it sounds like we can come back that same council meeting in February and maybe give you guys an idea. Maybe it's a one rate rules them all, or some of the things we've discussed is a, 3-tier, perhaps a 4-tier, because you're gonna have non-residential costs. And then again, we have some kind of unique characteristics. We've talked a little bit about like an average fee and then maybe a discount fee. Because again, our lot sizes are so large, our impervious surfaces are so large. So we're looking at a few different tiers. And then kind of a power user tier as well that would also be really kind of a non-residential look. But that's,
To me, the key question is, how soon after establishing the tier structure do we get to revisit it? Because right now, it's just about getting 12 months worth of revenue in versus 0.
we'll find some of that out from King County.
I think we also could set multiple tiers and charge the same rate for all of them, right?
That's what.
Which gives us flexibility.
Yep,
right?
sure.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Maybe $1 difference, yeah.
The tier can be the same.
Yep.
That's what I would do.
Yep.
Then you set your tiers up and then you can revise them later.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So we'll noodle it a little bit and bring some more stuff back to you.
And if it turns out,
give me
if it
some
turns out
clarity.
the deadline is sooner than the end of the month, and you need a special meeting.
Yeah, good.
I'm sure we can get a
That's a
form.
good. Yep.
We will
Sorry.
definitely let you know
Yep.
if that's the case.
Hit the panic button.
You were about to say something, Mr.
Actually, that's fine. I think you made the point there. I don't
All right, so there's that one. Streets, I don't have a whole lot of exciting things to say about that. Overlays on the way, and there you go. We've already done a bunch of questions. Anything else? End of report.
Yeah, public works. That's a big item for one of these things. Lisa, financial report?
Oh, right, I'll dive in. So this is the preliminary December 2003 financial report. I say that this is preliminary because Washington state law says that a city has 20 days in January to continue charging against the 2023 budget or the prior year's budget. It's often referred to as the 13th period or the 13th month. Revenues are basically locked in for the year because we are a cash basis entity. So the money in the bank is the money that we're getting in this year. However, our expenditures will continue into this 13th period, which is closed on January 20th. So overall city revenues have totaled about 6.48 million this year, and they're finishing the year about 1.8% below our budget expectations. Despite some revenues such as our interest income, our sales tax, utility taxes, and like REIT money has come in high, but in other items, like development revenue in particular, our wireless communication facility leases, we haven't gotten some of the flood control district money that we're going to be using for the storm comprehensive plan that they're working on right now. So some of that's been offset. Of the total mentioned, our operating revenues have finished the year about 0.4% ahead of our budget. So our operating revenues are a little bit high, which is great. We're very close to what we said we would be at. In December, our sales tax was $69,000, which represents October purchases. So we should see a bump in January and February as you get that all the Christmas spending and holiday spending that comes in. No new single-family residential permits were issued in November or December, so that leaves the total for the year at 12. As I mentioned, development revenues finished the year about 12.5% behind budget expectations. REIT money, that's the real estate excise tax that we receive on the sale of homes, finished the year about 8.4% above estimates. We did have one more home sale in December with a sale price of $5.9 million. Our utility taxes have outperformed the budget by about $33,000 or 4.1%. This was primarily led by the City of Bellevue water utility fees and Puget Sound Energy, electricity and natural gas fees increasing. Just to remind folks, Comcast still has one outstanding payment due. This is from an error they made in Q1. We have reached out to them every single month faithfully, and we're having a difficult time getting them to respond. So we're going to continue working on that.
They play games with franchise fees for 50 years.
Yep. A net earnings rate of 5.43% on our LGIP balance of about $5.6 million resulted in interest payments of about $27,000 this year. As of the preliminary report, operating expenditures are under budget by about $540,000. But as I mentioned, because expenditures are still coming in for that 13th period, that number will change. I do want to point out one thing that's a little bit odd on the cash and investment report, which is the 6th page on here, has a bunch of pictures on it. John?
You got control.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was not what was coming up
Oh,
there.
funny.
Anyhow, that report shows that we have a negative balance on our payroll account. This is a result again of that 13th period. So on the last payroll of the year is for January, we pay on January 5th, but it's recorded in the prior year because it's for hours that people worked through December 31st. So just so you know, we'll reconcile it in January, but it always looks a little goofy on this report. Otherwise, next month will be a much more comprehensive year-end 23 report. We'll be able to tell you how did the year end, what does our overall ending fund balance look like going into 2024, and we'll bring you a lot more details. So I don't want to take up any more time tonight on an incomplete report. There you go. It shows U.S. bank checking negative $153,713 on the bottom.
Negative slice in the pie.
Exactly. And I love that the picture doesn't reflect a negative pie. It didn't know how to do that. So.
That's not Euclidean geometry, right?
Indeed.
Oh, no. I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So
Shoot.
I know it's late, so I'll be shorter than I was going to plan to be. So I went back to, right, because I can't help myself, I guess, to the November 28th presentation of the 2024 budget. And in that, we had a forecast of what 2023 would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all that presentation was I'll call the annual presentation. And the reason for that, I was saying, okay, well, we projected, I think back then, revenues of 5208 rounded.
Okay.
And then we wound up a little short. We wound up 5185. But in trying to do that exercise, Lisa, I discovered that the basis of presentation for the annual is different than the monthly. And so now there are some captions that you can easily, interest income, right? Property taxes, the Yarrow Point intergovernmental stuff, and something on taxes, another tax thing. But it's really, so as I looked at 2024, and presume I'm on this budget advisory committee, it would be very helpful just in terms of connecting the dots to have a similar presentation where you can track. So, one way is to, I won't tell you if you think it's a worthy idea, and I think it would be helpful for me and others that try to track it. One idea might be to have the monthly presentations in a way where maybe it's just the captions that relate to the annual presentation. But there's a number of ways that the tracking could work. But the way it's working today, it's you don't have that visibility. You can't connect the dots except for those 4 or 5 line items. Does that make sense to you?
I'll need to sit down with you and kind of look at the two things you're trying to compare, so that I have a better sense of where the disconnect is, and so that way I can hopefully get the information to you in the most effective way. So if we can take some time this week or next week and sit down and go over some details, I would really appreciate it. That would be, I think, much more effective than trying to.
It's really, conceptually, it's just a basis of presentation. That's it. Okay. It's not, I'm really not looking for anything, but as I think about 2024, having a consistent basis of presentation between the annual and the monthly would be, I think, incredibly helpful for analysis. Okay. That's thing one. And then thing two, on the investment report, just a consideration, I think it was on page 174. And you mentioned it in your remarks, the yield on the state stuff. What would also be helpful maybe is just to maybe get, and we can maybe just do on Friday, but the blended yield on all the money that you got, I don't know what you got like 6-7 million in the government fund, and then you got the bonds and all that other stuff and the other stuff with the investment banker guy. But to get the yield, the yield on the portfolio as a whole, maybe you divided it. So, and what is our assumed yield for 2024? I look at interest income as a sort of a wild card, as you probably do.
Yes.
In terms of meeting our goals for 2024. And as I stand here today, maybe we'll find out on Friday. It's hard to tell what our assumptions are for 2024.
Yeah, basically we talk with our investment brokers and ask them what they think next year is going to look like. And then we take the, federal data and attend a whole bunch of meetings that Washington State provides with their expectations, and we use that as a basis.
And I know you have 4 million locked and loaded because it matures beyond 2024.
Exactly.
So you have that. Anyway, just an idea in terms of presentation going forward. Those are the two things. That's
Thank
it.
you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Chief, are you still around?
I'm always around, just know that.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'll just make it real quick. We rounded out the year with a bunch of in-service training. We got to get all the fun stuff out of the way, biohazard, yearly updates on first aid, firearms, and defensive tactics. We also did I did it in Commander Hansen also did a spot inventory on our property evidence room. It's safe to say nothing is missing. So other than that, if somebody has specific questions that I can answer.
And thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely. Have a great evening.
10-6 public records report. My intention would be to move on and you can read the report. So, all right. Mayor and council reports. Let me give you a quick update on what's gone on between that and the Point City's mayor meeting. There's been indirectly some conversation about it already. Two areas to talk about. 520 Lid is the first one. We met with Jack McCullough, who's going to be the attorney who will represent us in mediation with WashDOT. For those of you new to the council, the Point Cities are in a dispute with the Department of Transportation over maintenance over the lids. They've been maintaining them for years. There's no agreement with WashDOT on maintenance, and WashDOT has decided they don't want to do it anymore. And so we're fighting with them over that. We're going to go to mediation to review, to determine possible settlement on the issue. So Jack McCullough is a local attorney, Seattle attorney who will represent us. The issue itself has been generally managed from a mayor standpoint by Joe Sabie in Hunts Point because he's been the most involved and probably has the most history on the lid. So we met with the attorney, City Administrator Rolla and Mayor Klaus and me. We met more to start talking about the issues from the standpoint. It was just he met individually with each city. At this point, what the attorney is now doing is working on mediator selection, kind of setting dates. It looks like it's going to be spring or later before we do the mediation. And he'll start bringing in the issues as the cities see them. So that's kind of the best I can kind of give you at this point without explaining too much strategy in this. We talked about getting involved in the state. On the legislative side, this is the second issue. We've had meetings. In fact, this morning we even had a meeting with our state lobbyists that we hired last month. I'm impressed. Their ears are to the ground, and they seem, the lobbyists, Soundview, definitely has a sense of when things are happening and what's happening, and knows who to talk to about it. The key legislation, subject to what we've heard about subdividing properties, has really been transit-oriented bills, which has been submitted in both the House and the Senate in what looks to me like relatively similar forms, which means that they're almost the same, but they're not. The impact on Clyde Hill here are the distances that would be established from key transit stops into the community. And the transit stops in question would be rail transit and bus rapid transit. It looks, in my opinion, that we're okay. I think we're okay on the rail transit distances, and there's no impact, meaning that they have high density construction would be allowed within a certain distance from these transit locations so that people can walk to them easily and live nearby. The other issue would be the bus stop on 520, and that's questionable and maybe part of it may be within the definition of bus, what they're calling bus rapid transit. It's not a rapid transit, bus rapid transit line, but there's other definitions within it that might bring that into an issue that would force us to change some zoning within a certain radius from that. That's what they're working on.
Sorry. Question.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the big center between Clyde Hill and Yarrow Point. There are a bunch of other bus stops. So there are bus stops along 84th.
Those are not tied into this legislation.
Great, thank you.
It's bus stationary areas in rail. It's what it's currently written. Stationary is not stationary. It says it's currently written, and they're in hearings today, and so the legislation is moving fast, but there's still a lot to do. The lobbyist has done a good job, and she is. These issues are not just solely related to Clyde Hill. Mercer Island has issues with it, and other areas have similar issues, other cities. So we're not, at this point, the next step will probably be letters that we would write as a city and the voice communities would do individually. And I don't know that we're going to testifying would be later, if it's relevant or if it's to go beyond this issue. Fine, we heard that today. Anyway, so as we get more updates, we'll get updates into as these talks progress. But it's moving along right now, but there's still a lot to be done. So, East Side Transit Drive.
Yeah, no, the meeting is actually on Friday. You can see the agenda. It's really setting the stage for this year. And where it is third week of this month.
Sound Cities, I guess, is mine, and I have no idea. I've not done it, and I'm followed up yet.
They didn't meet this.
Yeah. Well, then I have missed it. I talked about Ms. Wack. They're meeting this Friday also. And Myra, nothing?
No, it's third week.
Any other items of interest? Okay. Well, we're at. Anything else would be future agenda topics, and I think you have a laundry list of things to carry over. My style, whatever you want to. Are there any other topics relevant that we want to make sure that we discuss next month?
I think we set a record though.
Yes, applause.
I know this is a long one. It's not my goal.
It's okay. No, it's okay.
in planning out my priorities, one of my topics was how to make a meeting faster. And I have completely failed in this first meeting in that respect, but it's not that I don't wish to make them more efficient. So if there's nothing else,
Motion to adjourn?
we
Oh, correct.
we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
The information that you're going to send the council members on